not sure. Who's doing impact fees? Okay, all right. We're going to go ahead and call the, what is this, a workshop? Is that what we're calling it? Gonna go ahead and call the workshop to order. Good morning.
Nice look, Bobby.
Hello, Paul.
Good morning.
All right, we're going to go ahead and start the impact fee update study. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Planning Commissioners. My name's Elaine Barker. I'm the Impact Fee Coordinator for staff. We're here this morning to provide a general overview of the Impact Fee Study draft dated January 8th, 2021, prepared by Tyndall Oliver. And I'm going to go over some comparisons from the 2015 to the 2021. And there is no action being requested at this work session today. Impact fees are a one-time fee assessed on new development. When a new home or business is built or expanded, they impact county services such as public safety, law enforcement, and roads. The impact fee needs to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, and the comp plan has an adopted level of service standards for infrastructure and services in the county. Impact fees help the county to increase capacity improvement and maintain the same levels of service as those provided before new development occurred. And they are not allowed to be used to maintain or rehabilitate existing infrastructure. Since 1986, the county has implemented impact fees for transportation, parks, public safety, and law enforcement. In 2015, the county added library facilities as a component to fund expansion of the library system. And this is just a history slide that shows the different dates impact fees were done. To comply with Chapter 11 of the LDC, at least once every 5 years, the Impact Fee Division must bring forward our recommendations whether any changes should be made based on the new study. The last impact fee study was adopted December 2015, effective 2016, and was a three-phase approach. So let's look at some of the comparisons. With 2015 study for residential, we went from assessing the number of bedrooms to square footage. The square footage ranges on the left, we're proposing to carry those forward, the 5 different tiers. Our consultant has advised us that this is a very granular. The difference, for instance, from going from like tier 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 is about a half a person of impact. The other thing we're going to be recommending is that we add a group called Congregate Care and ALF. Currently, those are being assessed at the nursing home. So due to changes over the past 5 years, we're recommending we separate that out. It's not that they weren't being charged, it's just that we want to treat them as their own use and not the same as everybody else. The 2015 land uses on the left for the non-residential increased from 13 to 10 in 2015. We're proposing to keep those and then add the ones on the bottom right. Separate those out. Again, based on the changes in demand, we want them to be their own category. For example, a gas station by fueling position as opposed to square footage of the retail convenience store. This is the current districts for road impact fees, and we have them 4 separate: northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. We're proposing to keep those the same. This is your current impact fee schedule, and I just put this in as information. And then this would be the impact fee schedule based on results of the study. And looking at the differences in those, we've just done an average increase based on results of the study. For a 2,000 square foot dwelling, single family is approximately 24%. Manufactured home is approximately 31%. And then here's some differences in the non-residential. For 1,000 square foot, average increase ranges from 27% to 45% in the commercial in the different districts. So the current schedule we're on, we held a work session with the Board of County Commissioners on January 19th. Throughout the month of February and into the beginning of March, we're doing a stakeholder engagement, and I can go more into detail on the next slide with that. Of course, today is the Planning Commission work session. So we have our planning task force for February 25th. We do currently have review of the study online, so people can make comments from February 5th through March 8th. Our Affordable Housing Advisory Committee is scheduled for February 22nd, and we do have the Neighborhood Connections newsletter out for February. As the Planning Commission, you're not making the physical policy decisions, and no action is being requested today. However, when we come back before you in March 11th, I believe, we will be seeking consideration that you find the study and the proposed text amendments to the Land Development Code to be consistent with the comp plan. Questions or comments?
Thank you. Can you pull the slide back up, the one that shows the increases?
The averages?
Yes, ma'am. No, the next slide. I just saw some that were approaching 70, and I was wondering how that was. That seems like doesn't seem like a typical increase with an update to increase it by 70%. Is there any information on that?
So the study, just, okay.
Hey, good morning, Commissioners.
John.
I'm John Osborne. I'm the Deputy County Administrator for the county. So some of the fees have changed quite a bit, and a lot of it has to do with the ITE manual has also been updated recently.
Yeah.
And if you're familiar with that manual, that's an Institute of Traffic Engineers trip generation manual. We see a lot of the traffic studies reference it in terms of the average number of trips a use will generate in any given time period, AM peak, PM peak, and that kind of thing. And when the last update occurred, it cleaned out a lot of old data out of that study. So a lot of the numbers have changed quite dramatically. You don't look at a Sears in Huntsville, Alabama from 1972 anymore in the study. So you have more relevant data, more modern uses in there, and a lot of the numbers changed because of that issue as well. So you had some dramatic sort of swings in some of these numbers. Now they're more accurate data, more consistent with what is really occurring these days. You don't have gas stations anymore, you have Wawas and things like that.
Okay, so there's a correlation between the that's the, I guess, the mechanism to carry it from one use to the other is the trip generation, the number of cars that would be generated, and that's true not only with the transportation impact fee, but the other fees too.
The other fees probably didn't swing nearly as much as the transportation did. The transportation, because of the trip generation changes, was probably the one that swung the most out of all the studies.
The average that's represented here is the total amount. Is that correct?
Correct.
So the transportation could be higher than 69% for Southwest District and 100,000 square feet. Okay. It just seems like it potentially, especially with office, I have to question if office is going to be something that generates a lot of traffic in the near future, and who knows long term. So I think there may be a reassessment at some point.
And when you're seeing the average increase for the dollar amount, is that the actual, like, 100,000 square foot, that's 624,000 is the actual increase?
Yeah, so we look at,
So the average impact fee right now is around 600,000. And when this is done, the impact fee is going to be 1.2 million.
yeah, so the four transportation impact fee districts, they're all a little bit different. They did consolidate the districts now, though, between the Southwest and the other three districts. So the other three districts were pretty close when the math was done. So we essentially said, let's keep those all the same numbers. So the biggest difference really now between all the numbers is the Southwest District, because of just the unique circumstances associated with being in the Southwest District, grid streets, everything connects. You have a lot of, most of this development types is infill. It's just a unique area compared to what's happening in the rest of the county, the three other districts.
And has there been any consideration or thought as to maybe removing the transportation impact fee and going to mobility fee?
Yes, sir. We have the contract with the consultant is to first update the study. So the Florida Impact Fee Act requires us to have the most current relevant data to have associated with the fees.
Right.
So this is the update. We also have part of the contract is to do essentially like a multimodal transportation plan.
Right.
And a mobility fee as well. And that'll come after this. And that'll provide Planning Commission Board an opportunity to consider a mobility fee and some of the advantages associated with having a mobility fee. And Mr. Davis is here if you have any questions about that.
No, I just see that as being a trend. I know, I think 2 days ago, I heard an update on Sarasota County's mobility fee, their process they're going through. And I think that removes the proportionate share calculation. It's just pay and go to some degree. I know it's not quite that easy, but with regard to residential, Elaine, can you go to the residential part of it? One of the things that we know to be a need is affordable housing. Is there anything in the impact fee, the proposed updates that would allow for some allowance for affordability? I know if it shows up in the impact fee ordinance, they can't be exempt. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we have a thing called Livable Manatee, and that's run by our Redevelopment Economic Opportunity Department. And so if somebody has a housing development that qualifies as affordable housing, in the past, what we've done is we've have another fund basically to pay down the fees associated with impact fees associated with that affordable housing development. Or we also have another opportunity to use some other fees associated with the TIF monies for other infrastructure improvements to help out development in the Southwest typically, or in that TIF area. However, the statute changed last year. It allows local governments to basically waive impact fees for affordable housing. If you meet the state definition of affordable housing, you can waive impact fees.
Okay.
So that'll be part of our, also, we submitted a request for legal services to our county attorney's office. You'll see as the land development code part of this comes back and our procedures manual comes back, you'll likely see some changes in there to reflect the new statute.
And that was a result of House Bill 7301?
I believe so. I don't remember the numbers specifically, but that's probably it.
Okay, all right. No, I think that would be well received and welcomed by the community to at least provide a path to more affordability. I mean, it gets tacked on to the units regardless. The end users end up paying, so.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions or comments regarding the study?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Rutledge?
Yes, sir. So, John, thanks for being here this morning. I always appreciate when you come and give us some real insight. So I had a couple of questions. One is the correlation for impact fees adjusted for services that are currently available? In other words, when you talk about the Southwest section having high mobility fees, I guess my question is, how is it adjusted for areas that already have improvements and we're trying to densify areas? And it seems like the traffic piece kind of goes against that. Is that illogical or is that me?
That's a complicated question.
Yes, no, maybe.
Yeah, I may have to have Clark come here and help me out with that one. But the way it sort of works out is we have very different areas of the county that are growing, and you have very different trip conditions in different parts of the county. People that live in the developing areas of Parish and Lakewood Ranch typically have a longer commute. They have more time in the vehicle. They use more lane miles per capita than somebody likely in the southwest part of the county. I believe the study reflects that. You also have to look at what other funding sources are being used in place of impact fees. So as an example, we have used the infrastructure sales tax in certain areas to address capacity projects. So there's credits involved as well as those have been used. Typically, we try to actually use impact fees for capacity adding projects, but when you have some other monies like IST, the board has made some decisions about where to use those as well. So it's kind of, the sausage making is complicated. The study is a pretty deep document. I feel like it's a college degree in and of itself. But I hope that gave you some insight, sir, about how that is done. And like I said, Clark could probably give a better and more thorough and educated answer on that question than I can.
And I think one of the layman's elements is that these fees are used for new improvements or capacity adding improvements, not improvements to fix existing issues. I think that's important to know. So that may help understand why the certain areas have a more.
Yeah, I think that, there are a couple of things in here that they kind of seemed, when I read the draft, which I love this stuff. I know it doesn't seem likely, but I love the detail of this. I love the analysis. I love putting it all on a grid so we can look at it and say, hey, what does it cost a resident who moves into 1,000 square feet to have the library? And should it cost twice as much for somebody that has excess of 2,000 feet to have that same library? So I think those are all very interesting analysis, and you got to start somewhere, and I get that. But there seems to be a number of areas where, for example, mobile homes have a high impact fee, and yet we're trying to find affordable housing. I don't think there's any doubt manufactured housing or mobile homes or even tiny homes have a vehicle of making affordable housing, and yet it seems like their cost is rising. And so I guess my overall question, Mr. Osborne, is have these been looked at to meet the county's experience, and that's what's depicted here? Is it the national average that also includes places like Orlando, even Metro Tampa, which are so different? So I guess what's the baseline, and then how does the buildup come from there? Is it all analytical, or is it a little bit of, like you said, sausage, where, well, yeah, we have this experience, we have that experience?
Yeah, Commissioner, there is some sausage making involved, certainly. So, but the thing about it is, in an impact fee study, is the math is the math. So if you have, whether it be a mobile home or a single family dwelling unit or a multifamily unit, there's a certain amount of impact, persons per household, trips generated from that type of use. It doesn't really get into what the income level of the person is living there. So it's basically the math of the impact, and that's what the impact fee study really does. And it'll be up to the board to make that policy decision on, what Elaine showed you a slide that had the percentage of adoption. As an example, when impact fees were adopted last time in 2016, the board put in sort of a graduated implementation schedule. Originally, they said, well, the first year we adopt these, we're going to bring them in at 80%. And oh, by the way, we have this fund for affordable housing that will help buy down the impact fees of affordable housing. And then the next year they implemented it at 90%. And then the next year, they were supposed to go to full 100%, but the board decided to keep it at 90% that third year of implementation. And the board could certainly do that again. The board has that prerogative to say, we're going to adopt these at X percent, and have that ability to implement the policy as they see fit, realizing that whatever they get then, whatever we get revenue-wise, we'll be able to build that infrastructure based upon that percentage. So there is a complicated discussion and policy decision the board will have to make when it comes to things like affordable housing and that kind of thing. It's complicated. It's tough. The board has there's a lot to weigh in on that decision. There's a lot of considerations to make, but the math and the impact fee study has to be the math.
And is that regionalized or is it national, or what's the baseline for building up those numbers?
Let's try to wrap it up. We've got a public hearing coming up in 5 minutes. We'll need to give them some opportunity to get set up, but Clark, you have something.
I'll try and
to
be
add.
brief. Good morning. For the record, my name is Clark Davis. I'm Deputy Director of Traffic Management for Public Works. The answer is that almost all the data is localized. I came in a couple minutes late, but if Elaine didn't explain it, what we've got is a consumption-based system. And so what it looks at is what the amount of infrastructure that a new development uses up on a per capita basis in general. And so it's however many units of library per capita. If that's $100 per unit and an average house has 3 units of consumption people in it, then it would be $300 and so on. So the way they determine what a new development might use is based on the existing data. And so it looks at the inventory in the case of libraries, our library buildings and the size of the collection, so how much of that we have available per capita. And it's Manatee County specific data as recent as we can get. The one area where we don't always have good localized data is for trip generation and trip length that goes into the road impact fees. We happen to have a consultant on board that's done a lot of studies in Florida and in our region, and when they have data specific to our area, they use it. Then they look at the region, then the state, and then finally rely on national data for that. So it's not always as localized, but it's as good as the data is that's available for it. And for transportation in particular, we have 4 different districts. For the study, the transportation costs and the trip characteristics are the same throughout the county, but there's an adjustment for how the capacity is used that's unique to Southwest County, and that tends to pull the road impact fee down a little bit there. That just, the roads, because it's more built out and gridded, that the roads are used, say, more efficiently, but that's another way of saying they're typically busier in Southwest County, and the study recognizes that.
Right, and to Paul's question, it's probably, you start with maybe national presumptions, but then you adjust it for local conditions and data. Is that correct?
Yeah, we saw that more in the, I'd say, the trip length data than we did the trip generation data. Most of the trip generation's ICE.
So if somebody looked at Sarasota County, it may be different, maybe not. They're very similar counties. If they looked at, say, Miami-Dade, it would be different. It's
Right.
the analysis.
But if we had information from other medium-sized counties in the area, like Sarasota County, we would use that in favor of, say, Orlando data or national data if they had it. So.
And then the last point, just to kind of restate, the whole purpose of impact fee is to make the development or new development fiscally neutral, that the existing taxpayers don't have to provide capacity for the improvements necessary to support that development. Is that an accurate summation?
Yeah, and the way to look at it is you are charging them in proportion to the amount of capacity they use up. So they come up here and they use some of the libraries, they use some of the roads, and so because they use some of it up, they're paying say a replacement cost for it, and the impact fee it represents that in a way.
To your point, they use $100 worth of library, they pay $100 for the.
It's tempered a bit with some internal credit factors and things like that, but that's the gist of it.
Okay, all right, thank you, that's very helpful. One last thing before you wrap up. I know capacity fees, like water sewer connection fees and capacity fees, those are in a separate ordinance.
Yes, sir.
Is the intent to reevaluate those kind of parallel with the impact fees?
Those have also been updated recently. A facility investment fee is basically another name for impact fee, really. They are truly impact fees. So we are the same requirements of the Florida Impact Fee Act to keep the data behind that fee schedule relevant and up to date, and the board has actually updated those in the past year or two.
Okay.
Those don't always come, they're not part of our code specifically, but they are part of a county ordinance, but you obviously wouldn't see those.
Right.
So.
Okay, appreciate the information. It's very informative. I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion. I'm going to go ahead and close the public workshop and allow. For the workshop? Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know if we normally do open to the public, but if we have people interested, please come forward and provide your comments. Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, Glenn Gibolina. I'm vice chair of the Affordable Housing Meeting Board here. Pardon? Okay, so impact fees. You know, we give out bonus densities like, Biden writes executive orders. It's got to stop. The bonuses are for affordable housing. That's what they should be used for, and they haven't. So in lieu of that, we should have some type of fee. Now, I certainly like the example in Massachusetts. So what they do is, you got a $300,000 house, the average mean is $200,000, it's a $100,000 difference. Real simple. So I think we need to incorporate that and tell these developers that their free pass with the bonus density without stepping up to the plate what it was designed for has got to stop. And then we would have money to build affordable housing. And I'll give you an example. This was my statement Tuesday to the commissioners. So we have an inclusionary tax that we can also use, and I think we need to incorporate that. Would be very easy to do that. And then the mandatory inclusionary policies. So density bonus is a privilege, not a right. Density bonus is for affordable housing, not market rate rentals or sales. And here's the problem I have with the developers. They never tell you what the retail price of that rental or sale is. They never tell you what the percentage over Alice is, over the 30% of income. They never tell you that the entry-level sheriff, EMS, fire, or school will never be able to live there, much less like the checkout personnel, the grocery store, restaurants. I don't understand it. It's 25%. Are they too embarrassed to live next door to an entry-level school teacher or a Publix cashier? These developers, they go off the reservation and they think they're entitled to the bonuses. They are not. It's okay for them to drive miles. They never tell you with the added density bonuses, it will put additional stress on our resources, but they want the services anyway. They never tell you that the free density will rake in millions more for the developers and do nothing for affordable housing. They never tell you, and the commissioners never ask. I propose a $10,000 unit fee for up to 2499 square feet and $15,000 for over 2,500. The developers would gladly pay if they knew they had the density coming instead of begging, instead of getting it. So these fees alone would put millions into affordable housing. I'll give you an example. Last week we gave 150 density bonuses to 2 developers. If we had 10 grand on just that, we'd have $1.5 million in our coffers, and that's the way to go. And lastly, but not least, I think pocket neighborhoods, you're going to see a lot of them, at least coming from this developer, and I think it's the way to go. Infill lots, pocket developments. Ross Chapman, he's a hero. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to come forward, make a comment or statement regarding the impact fee study, the update? Say again? Anything? Anyone? Anyone? All right. Thank you very much. So we're going to close the workshop and get ready for the public hearing. All right, good morning. I'd like to call the regularly scheduled Planning Commission for February 11th, 2021 to order. If you would, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
There it is.
All right, thank you. I think it's been almost a year since we've held a meeting in here, so it's not surprising there's a little bit of uncertainty and confusion. All right, thank you very much. So let's go ahead and jump into the agenda. We've previously had our workshop, so the first item on the agenda are changes to the agenda. Ms. Slider, are there any changes to the agenda?
No pledge the allegiance?
Just did that.
Paul.
You can do it all by yourself, though.
You must have
been in the
bathroom, Paul.
Good morning. Changes to the agenda are for PDMU 1811 Riverfront PDMU RFT Holding LLC, and it's a revived alternative motion and a stipulation in a straight-through underlined format and public comment letters attached.
Very good, thank you. Ms. Schenk, anything from the county attorney's office?
No changes.
Okay, very good, thank you. All right. I don't see minutes on the agenda. Did we have minutes sent out?
Mr. Chairman, they were added with the agenda update for November 12th.
Oh, I'm sorry. I might have understood that if I was listening. So we have the minutes from the November 12th, 2020 hearing. Have the commissioners had an opportunity to review, and if so, are there any modifications, changes, clarifications? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion.
Mr. Ron.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the November 12th, 2020 Planning Commission.
Very good. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Smock, second. Any discussion? Okay, the chair's going to call the matter to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rutledge. Opposed, like sign. Chair votes aye. Motion passes 6-0 with, who's missing?
No one.
No one. Oh, that's right, Mr. Rutledge. I'm sorry. Motion passes 7-0. Let the minutes reflect 7-0. All right, thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is citizen comments. This is an opportunity to make a statement or a comment regarding things that are not on today's agenda. When the applications are heard and you wish to make a comment on something that is on today's agenda, you'll have another opportunity to make a statement or comment. So again, is there anybody who wishes to make a statement or comment regarding things that are not on today's agenda? Okay, seeing no one come forward, we're going to close the public comment portion. We're going to move on to the first item, which is item number 3, PCD 20-07(P). Ms. Slider, can you please read item number 3 into the record?
Yes, PDC 2007P, Aldi, Florida LLC, Aldi Store Number 54, Bradenton Expansion. It's a preliminary site plan for an expansion of 2,350 square feet to a previously approved preliminary site plan for a grocery store of 17,018 square feet for a total of 19,368 square foot retail facility on more or less 3.96 acres located in the northeast corner of 53rd Avenue East, State Road 70 and 45th Street East at 4525 53rd Avenue East, Bradenton. The case manager is Ms. Dorothy Rainey, and I don't know if the applicant is here at this moment. Is here?
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. And before we go to the applicant's introduction or presentation of the application, I would like to ask the commissioners, have there been any ex parte communications regarding this application?
No.
Okay,
No, sir.
hearing, sorry, Mr. Rutledge?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. I need to remember to give you time to respond. Okay, with that, this is quasi judicial, so this and the next application are both quasi judicial. Anyone intending to speak on either party, either as a applicant of a team member of the applicant, staff, or citizens, if you wish to speak on these matters, you need to be sworn in, so please rise to be sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm that the factual statements and factual representations which you are about to present to the Planning Commission will be truthful and accurate?
Very good, thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead to the applicant's presentation for the item number 3. So if you could, please come forward, state your name, that you have been sworn, and you'll have 15 minutes. Thank you.
Won't take that long.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Scott Stannard. I am with Commercial Site Solutions. We are the site civil engineers for Aldi, and we're also the applicant for this particular project. I also have a little PowerPoint that I put together, but I noticed in your staff report that most of the information I have in the PowerPoint is in your report, so I'll just go through this, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have as we go. So in terms of the expansion, this is the existing store that's over on State Road 70 at 45th. Aldi's store that we actually worked with Rosina on, actually, the first time we went through. And store's been open for about 5 years now. It's done very well. This expansion proposal is actually part of Aldi's corporate program, where they're now going back, just in light of architecture and customer demands and things that they need in terms to service those customers. They have a corporate-wide program where they're updating their architecture. They're making it a little bit more sleek, a little more modern looking. They're moving this particular expansion allows them to move the cash registers towards the front of that building a little bit, which gives expanded aisles for shoppers to get around and makes it a little easier. You'll see it's not a particularly large expansion. It's around plus or minus 2,600 square feet. So it doesn't add a bunch of retail space. But what it does is it'll bring that store, which again is a little older at 5 years, it'll bring it up to its corporate model that they're using for the new stores, and it gives a consistent look throughout this region for the stores that they're building. You'll see in your staff report there are a couple of challenges that go with this, even though it's a fairly small one. And that is, in order to put that expansion on the south side of that building, we have to take out some of the parking that's in that area right now. We've relocated that parking over to the western side of the parking lot, which is facing towards the stormwater pond. But that again presents its own challenges, because now we have to take out a little bit of that stormwater pond and then replace that volume that we lost in the pond, which we have done by regrading the ditch along State Road 70, which gives us that added volume to make up for what we lost with that additional parking. In terms of land planning, and buffering and landscaping, we've asked for a little bit of leeway on some of the buffering. We're putting in the same landscaping, but because of the pond, we have to shift where that landscaping goes a little bit, which affects that buffer. The screening's the same as what you'll see there now, and can always be beefed up if that's what need be. There is a creek that runs along the north side of this property, environmentally sensitive. This particular project will have no impacts to that. We're leaving those buffers, we're leaving the conservation areas, we're not putting any fill in the floodplain areas. That was all worked out the last time we went through this building the store. Since the store has been opened, we've also worked with the county on donating right-of-way, which is all now complete. There's a brand new signal there or an upgrade to the signal there at 45th and State Road 70. All of that work is also complete. Store seems to be functioning very well with that. And then in terms of just where we are with the other agencies, Swift Mud has already gone through the approval process. We've received those permits. And now as we go through staff here with the county, we hope to receive the permits for the ultimate construction project. And I think that's, from a technical standpoint, that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Very good, thank you. Thank you. All right.
I have, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Paul.
I would like to know, and I don't know if Scott knows the answer to this, but I'd be very curious as to the health and viability of the berming and the plant vegetation around the creek on the north side. This was a highly sensitive area. They've operated for 5 years. You know, I'm a fan of Aldi's. I go there. And so I had two questions. One was about the environmental impact of the past 5 years and the veracity of the berm, plantings, and the creek there. And the other one is the access point where people have to leave and go on to 45th to the north. And I'd like to know if they did any study about the number of accidents that have occurred there or at the turnaround where people where I make the U-turn further up the road. Those two things are curious to me.
I'll talk to the creek and the environmental first. Part of the swift mud requirements are that I go down and I do the inspections on the pond, and then I certify to the state every year that the pond is functioning as is. And as a part of that, I also go and I check the conservation area that we preserved along the creek. So far, we've actually done well. The natural vegetation that's along the creek has actually done extremely well as far as growing back in and sustaining itself. There's a planted area that we put in just north of the building that's actually a floodplain comp area that we graded out in case the creek were to rise. It has an area to go into. Some of those trees struggled when we first put them in. They've since been replaced and they've done pretty well. So without having been down there in the past few months, I can't tell you that every plant down there is doing it, you know, as it should. But in my periodic inspections every year, they seem to be doing very well. And the water quality also has been sustained from what we've done. In terms of the U-turn, that was, I kind of chuckle because it's not Aldi's choice as to what it would be if they had a choice, but they don't. For the safety, public safety, 45th had a new median put in, and so when you come out of the Aldi on the 45th, you have to make a right-hand turn as opposed to the old layout where you had a full access. There is a no U-turn sign just north of the Aldi, right in front of the fire department for obvious reasons. And then you have to go further north. In terms of any studies of any impacts to the traffic patterns up towards the neighborhood or additional accidents, I don't have an answer to that. I've not done that study.
Thank you. Anything additional, Mr. Rutledge?
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and go to the staff's presentation.
Can I use that? Very well, thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Dorothy Rainey for staff, and I have been sworn.
Thank you.
So today you have before you the Aldi's expansion, and as the applicant explained, it's to approve a preliminary site plan for an additional 2,350 square feet of expansion to the existing 17,018 square foot grocery store. And also they're adding, well, actually, they're not adding 11 parking spaces. Apparently, they're relocating the 11 parking spaces. And they also are requesting specific approval to allow, specific approval to allow more than 10 parking spaces in a row. There's going to be 11 spaces without a landscape island. They had already gotten a specific approval previously for that situation. And then they're also asking to reduce the roadway buffer along 45th Street East from 10 feet to 5 feet. They're going to provide an extra 8 feet of vehicle use area to the west of the relocated parking. So that will make up for it, and the amount of screening landscape material will be the same. It's in the future land use category of residential office retail, or retail office residential. PDC zoning, as it obtained that from the original approval of the project. It's one parcel, 3.96 acres, and the grocery store use is to be expanded on this site. There's the aerial photos. Surrounding uses to the north is RSF 4.5 zone single-family residence. To the south is PDC zone redevelopment commercial retail use, the Westlake Plaza across State Road 70. To the east is professional medium zone personal service establishment. There's a barber shop immediately adjacent, and RSF 6 zoned residences. To the west is GC zone convenience store with gas station or a 7-Eleven across 45th Street. This is a picture looking at the east side of the building. To the southeast is where the expansion is going to occur on the south side of the building facing 70. Here's looking kind of to the west at where the expansion of the parking is going to occur. That's the stormwater pond there. The site plan is showing the dark reddish is the expansion portion of the building. The rest of it, of course, is existing. The darker charcoal is the relocated parking, which was where the expansion is right now. And you can see there's access points right in, right out only, both onto 45th Street and State Road 70. Again, the access points are from 70 and 45th Street, right in, right out. The building is to the left of the entrance. Parking on the south and west sides of the building. Oh, no, that's, yeah. And then existing stormwater pond to the west is going to be reconfigured to add the parking at the east end of it. The positive aspects are that the request represents a small expansion of the existing building, which does not necessitate providing any utilities for the proposed expansion. Oops. The negative aspects, the expansion request will reduce open space and increase impervious area with the addition of the 2,350 square foot expansion and the additional parking spaces and drive aisle. The original project, though, provided 59% open space and is now providing 54% with the expansion, which is still over double the minimum 20% required. Our conclusion is that the request appears to meet the applicable policies of the Manatee County Comprehensive Plan as well as the Land Development Code regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
No, sir.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and open this application up for public comment. So if there's anybody in the audience who wishes to come forward and speak on item number 3, please do so. Anyone at all? Okay, seeing no one come forward, we're going to go ahead and close the public comment portion of the hearing. And I'll ask the commissioners, is there any additional information necessary?
No, sir.
Okay, all right. So we'll go to staff closing comments if there are any. Okay, all right. Seeing nothing. Applicants rebuttal. Okay, waiving the rebuttal. So we're going to go ahead and close the public hearing for this application, and the chair will entertain a motion or open it up for discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. DeLesline.
I move to recommend approval of preliminary site plan with stipulations A1 through A5, B1, C1, D1 through D6, adoption of the findings for specific approval and granted specific approval for alternates to section 701(3)A4, minimum required landscaping vehicular use area, and 701.4.B.2 roadway buffer zones for the Land Development Code as recommended by staff.
Very good. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Ron, second. Any discussion? All right, I'm going to call the vote by roll just to make sure we get everybody's vote. So, Mr. DeLesline.
Aye.
Mr. Smock.
Aye.
Mr. Ron.
Aye.
Mr. Heap.
Aye.
Mr. Roth.
Aye.
Mr. Rutledge.
Aye.
Very good. All right, chair votes aye. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. All right, we're going to go on to the next item, item number 4. So we're going to go ahead and open the public hearing for item number 4. Ms. Slider, can you please read item number 4 into the record?
PDMU 1811 CG Riverfront PDMU RFT Holdings LLC. A rezone of a more or less 11.1 acres generally located on the south side of US 301 north, more or less a half mile east of Interstate I-75 Ellington, comprised of 3.1 acres Zone A1 Agricultural Suburban, 6.1 acres Zone PDR Plan Development Residential, and 1.3 acres Zone GC General Commercial to the PDMU Plan Development Mixed Use Zoning District, a general development plan, 250 residential units and 143,000 square feet of non-residential uses, and a schedule of permitted and prohibited uses and as voluntary proffered by the applicant. The case manager is Mr. Marshall Robinson, and he represented the applicant is Mr. Bob Goss. And before go with the applicant presentation, we have an additional public comments that was missing in the staff report.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I guess
ma'am.
you're aware that there was a request for additional time requested by the Raintree Inlet Homeowners Association for 10 minutes for their attorney, Ms. Petroff. I just wanted to note that for record.
Very good, thank you. And we're set up a little bit different. The timer for time is on the corner of the counter at the front, so it's not the typical ones we have. So if you,
We'll try to respect that, but we may need a little bit more time. But look how early you are here today, you know? Anyway, good to be back in this building. Don't start it yet, Quinana. Good to be back in this building. Great to see you all. And we had a little trouble with the bridge, so I've just consulted with our client. We may have a few questions that we'll have to deal with. My name is Ed Vogler. I have been sworn, and I promise you today's hearing will be fun. Right? We're going to have fun because this is a creative, forward-thinking, mixed-use plan for this area. But let's take a minute and think about where this area is. I-75 and US 301, the outlet mall and all the development around that, the 5-story Hampton Inn, a major intersection improvement between FDOT and US 301. Does everybody know about that? New turn lanes, bridges over the roof. This will create a transformational renaissance for this area. But the county has considered this already. I'd like you to look at the overhead for a minute. So here's our comprehensive plan. All of this is ROR in a mixed-use project that allows 32 units per acre and 1.0 floor area ratio, which means you can get 43,560 square feet for each acre of non-residential uses, one of the most intense areas. What you also see by that drawing is it covers all the existing mobile home parks to the west, right? This is a transformational plan adopted by Manatee County for this area. And the ROR changes that were made recently are intended to encourage exactly the type of development that is being presented to you today. So now we're in the early stages of the renaissance for this area. And today, this project will test you in a way that most do not. And the test is this. We have to participate together in a planning exercise and a planning recommendation from the Planning Commission. The applicant has presented his vision for this project. It's a mixed-use, up to 9 stories project that is directly on the river that allows for the use of that amenity and consistently delivers the ROR expectations that have been adopted into the comprehensive plan. We need to go through this process, at a GDP level so that we can set the parameters, so we can set the guardrails for what the ultimate development will be. Then a developer, once we set the guardrails, will work with tenants and users, hotels, condominium developers, restaurateurs to design a project and to bring it forward into reality. This is a big project and a bold vision. The questions that are presented are, what do you think is the proper height of buildings in this area? Particularly when you see that all the objectively established setbacks from the code are actually met. What do you think is the proper density and intensity for this project when you consider that the request is well below the maximums that are allowed that I mentioned? And finally, there's a lot of discussion about open space, and I only want to touch that briefly now. We'll probably have questions and get back to it. But there is an FDOT pond that was taken by eminent domain from this property. And when FDOT took that, they gave to the landowner, this landowner, control of the pond, the right to maintain it, the right to improve it, the right to use it, except for drainage, because that's for the FDOT. But when this piece was taken from from this land, they put in place agreements that it would allow it to be considered as part of a planned development, and that's what we've proposed. There's 17% of the land area is in this pond. And so if you know that the pond is never going to change, and it's immediately contiguous with the property, and it was taken from the property, isn't that the intent to use that for open space? I would argue yes. We'll have to know what you think. And finally, Bob Goss is going to present our project, and we want to answer any questions, and we want to try to develop a design parameters together, and you'll see the rest of the presentation now.
Before you speak, Mr. Gauss, I'd like to ask the commissioners, have there been any ex parte communications regarding this application?
No, sir. No.
Mr. Rutledge?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Get back and she reset the clock to like 11.5 at 11. So, to be honest with you, it's going to be tough to get this presentation done in the time as it is. So I'm trying to get what I can. Hi, my name is Bob Gauss with Gauss & Associates. I have been sworn. In addition to Ed Vogler, I'm also joined here by the owners of the property, Mr. Frank Maloney and Mr. Chuck Meyer of Canal Road Investments and RFT Holdings LLC. I'm also joined, Michael Yates, who's the traffic engineer, is in the audience with us today. And it's been a long time since anybody's been in here doing this. So I'm going to try first to do this with this clicker, but I may just go back to the next slide. All right, as Mr. Vogler said, the property is located about 3/4 of a mile east of I-75, which, as you probably know, is going to become, I think, a 10-lane bridge across the Manatee River. This is one of the busiest intersections in Manatee County. We're on the south side. It's a vacant property. It is located within the RR zoned future land use designation, as Mr. Vogler said. You know, and as you probably remember, about 2 years ago, Manatee County staff recommended and the board approved and the state agreed with changes to the RR that took it from 9 units to the acre to 32 units to the acre when you do mixed-use development, then increase the intensity up to 1.0. So that is sort of what prompts this, is the fact that we feel the county made the decision to increase the intensity and the densities in areas where they felt RR was the appropriate use. The property is mostly outside the 100-year floodplain, and it's currently zoned PDR, A1, and general commercials. Sort of 3 parcels. They've got 3 different zonings. Actually, the parcel that was PDR at one time was PDMU, but at one point they were going to develop it as residential, and staff said you've got to change it to PDR in order to not, since you don't have an office or retail use associated with it. So now we're full circle. We want to include the other uses, and so we're going to PDMU. All right, yeah, okay. The request, the property's 11.1 acres. We are trying to take all of those zoning categories and combine them into a PDMU. We are asking that you allow us up to 250 dwelling units. And if we were to go to the max, it would be about 355. We're asking that you allow us to go up to 143,000 square feet of non-residential area and allow up to 80 slips in the marina. The overall density proposed is 22 dwelling units per acre, the maximum. The overall requested floor area ratio is 0.3, well below the maximum again. When we're working with staff, we kind of create 2 development parcels. If you look in the northeast portion, we call that development parcel A. And really, we decided that used to be general commercial, and it's right on the road. It's not reasonable for us to think we're going to put residential there. So we're saying basically we're going to put about 40,000, up to 40,000 square feet of non-residential along there. And then on the other parcel, parcel B, we call that about an 8-acre parcel, and we're saying that's where we would try and limit the residential to up to 250 units, up to 103,000 square feet of non-residential and the marina. And again, we say that we're proposing a 9-story building. Now, that's been one of the issues. What is the correct height? Mr. Vogler talked about that. And the point is, when the county made the changes to the comp plan on the RR, they also changed how you look at height. You know, the code used to have both the objective and a subjective component to how you looked at height. But back in 2019, staff recommended, the board approved, taking that subjective portion completely out of the land development code. That's gone. It's not there anymore. All that is left is the objective criteria, and staff agrees, we comply with the objective criteria. So there's no argument that we are in compliance with what the code requires. The question is that still what you want? But we are asking for nine stories, and we comply with the code. We've got landscape buffers. I've got a picture up there of an example of a type of building. You know, we're looking at it as something that steps back. As you go taller, you step back further and further from the property lines. And there's a canal on the east side of the property that separates us from the rain tree inlets people. You know, so the building's going to end up being fairly far away from those homes. The open space, which just talks about, you know, the property, PDMU talks about 25 and 20% as your required open space. It's this coastal planning area, it's the entranceway that jacks it up. And that is why Mr. Vogler has touched on the fact that we'd like to see if we can get credit for the fact that we have a 1.9 acre parcel taken from us, that we'd like credited because we feel that meets the intent. But we need the board to approve that. Tree preservation. There's another section of the entranceway that talks about preservation of 75% of the trees over 24-inch DBH. That works well when those 24-inch trees are out along the perimeter of the property. It doesn't work so well when those trees are not out in the perimeter of the property. Then the stormwater regulations and everything else that goes with it causes you to have trouble. Staff routinely works with developers to try and find a reasonable solution to that. However, interpretation is it requires the board to authorize staff to work with the developer. So we're asking that staff have the flexibility that we can work collaboratively with staff through the preliminary site plan and the final site plan to come to what is a reasonable solution to that. We know we can't set it right now because we still don't know exactly how things are going to lay out, but we are asking that the board approve us to have, and staff to have that flexibility to have those conversations. Native habitat. A lot of the wooded area on the site was designated as 425 temperate hardwoods. There's limitations on how many choices you get in the Florida Land Use Code cover classification system. So 425, the county looks at that typically as native habitat. I've got pictures there. It is native trees with an understory of nuisance and exotic vegetation. It doesn't really fit what you call native habitat, but nonetheless, that's what it was categorized. And we're saying we do want to preserve a section. I'm going to bounce down here. And we're going to preserve that section between the commercial and the residential area. In other words, up there along that portion that goes to the east between 301 and Raintree Inlets, there's about 4,700 square feet back there that we are trying to, we say that's an area we can preserve, and that's a wooded area, but it is, we don't want to try and preserve the entire area or 1.5 acres of area that's basically understory, uses vegetation. This is not really showing up right. We also have another policy that talks about the fact, you know, we're next to the Manatee River, and we want to do a marina, so we have to get agreement to allow us to do that as well. There's actually, I counted them. In Colony Cove, there's a basin back there. There's actually 110 boat slips back in that basin. It was just something that was kind of, you know, you look and you don't realize, but it's really 10 slip boat area. This is just to touch on, you know, some of the stuff we always try and go on. We feel we are consistent with the comprehensive plan. We're well under the maximum density. We're well under the maximum floor area ratio. You know, the criteria for approval. Are we compatible with existing development trends? We think we are. We think this is an area that is changing. It is continuing to change, and we feel that what we're proposing is reasonable. It is in the ROR, and the county recently made changes specifically to allow more intense, dense development in the ROR. This isn't out in the country anymore. This is a very urban area, and we think it's consistent with those changes. The comprehensive plan, we feel we are consistent with the comprehensive plan. There's discussion, the staff is like, well, is the height right? Well, there's only one thing that tells you about height in the code, and it is objective. And staff and we agree we're consistent. There are available public facilities in the to serve the site. It does not conflict with planned public improvements. In fact, one public improvement took property away from us. We do not adversely impact the health, safety, or welfare of the community. We comply with all aspects of the LDC. We are asking for some specific approvals. We feel we're in a logical expansion, and we're not impacting any historic resources. The environmental impacts, especially as related to a marina, as you go through the approval process, the preliminary and the final, there's going to be additional studies that you have to go through to address marinas. We're within the allowable uses. We have provided with the schedule of uses for staff to show what we can do. There's no homeowner relocations required as part of this, and we are consistent with the PDMU requirements. At the end of the day, I'm just going to leave this map up here. Mr. Vogler said it very well. What is our vision for this? I remember back in the 70s being amazed at Colony Cove going up way out east. Well, now that's not. Now this is a major intersection, it's a major non-residential intersection, and it's going to just continue to get busier. And so the intensity and the densities we feel have to be higher, and we think that's what staff said when they did the changes to the code and the comp plan, and that's what we're asking you to visualize, and we're asking for that flexibility to do that and set the parameters for development of this property. Thank you very much. And I'm here for any questions you may have.
Very good, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? I have a question regarding the DOT pond. What is the current ownership of that? And maybe Mr. Gauss or Mr. Vogler, if you could explain the correlation of the rights that are associated with that parcel of land and claiming it as open space one more time. Maybe summarize that.
No problem. It's an interesting one because I actually work with Mr. Mattingly. Don Mattingly, the baseball player, used to own this property. And I worked with his team when the DOT was taking the property. And he was concerned about how it was going to impact his property. And so he fought about it. And, the DOT grant had him said, you can landscape it, you can enhance it, you can maintain it. But we're going to take your property and we're going to put drainage through it. And that's sort of how it ended up. Now, the DOT has subsequently, and there's an easement, recorded easement, and the DOT has subsequently assigned that easement to RFT Holdings and Canal Road Investments. And we've actually gotten that signed by the DOT, and we've recorded it in the public records. So it's actually, my clients do now control that easement. There's no question about that. Mr. Vogler, if you want to touch on that.
That's a complete answer. Only underscore, this is a legal agreement. It's not just us theorizing about what we should be able to do. It's a legal agreement. The problem, Mr. Connerly, when you make an application for a zoning approval, you have to have the owners sign the application, right? DOT is not part of the applicant. But it's like an off-site easement, right? So if you had a project, you own 40 acres, and your easement extends a road, across, right? And it's a private easement. That's part of your project. You don't ask the fee title holder of that easement to sign your application. That runs with your property, and that's what we have here.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Heap.
You just said it's like an easement. Is it actually an easement?
It is an easement agreement, yes. I would say to you that I don't love the legal work that was done by Mr. Mattingly. I think the environmental work was done very, very well. I'm sure his baseball contract was a little better. This one's not perfect, but it's very clear as to intent, very clear as to intent.
I was going to ask this to staff, but is there any precedent of a similar situation? It seems odd to be using this as your open space.
I couldn't say that there's specific precedent. I do know this, that when you have off-site features that are committed, like conservation easements and restrictive covenants and so forth like that, we argue about that all the time up here. We say, look, this land next door is not going to change. So therefore, the impacts of our project on that land are not present. Now, you've asked a different question, which is, well, can you really absorb that piece into your site? And I'm not aware of specific precedent on that. But I think when you have an eminent domain where it was actually taken, there are provisions of the Land Development Code that say you're not supposed to be penalized by that. Very specific provisions. You're not supposed to be penalized. And so let me just emphasize, if you don't agree with us on that, and that's a question of interpretation and intent, then we simply default to whatever the requirement is for open space. It's not a basis for denial of our application. We're asking for the recognition of intent, interpretation, and this accommodation.
And one additional point of clarification, I think it was previously stated, was this property taken by eminent domain?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Thank you. All right, any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Ron?
Good morning, gentlemen. Good to see you guys. One quick question. Can you walk me through, I know you guys are looking for 2 9-story buildings. Is that correct?
No, we haven't established that. What we've established is that the maximum building height would be 9 stories. Realistically, probably wouldn't be more than 1 9-story building, and it would probably take on, see if I can go back. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna try and get back there without shooting too far past it. There we go. Realistically, it wouldn't even be a straight 9-story building. Realistically, it would be a stepped building. Some of it would be a little closer, but by the time you got up, that would be up to 9 stories. It would have that proper setback. And that is what the county did with the changes to 401, is they said, we're gonna make this very objective. We're gonna make this real clean. If you go 3 stories or less, then this is your setback. If you add a 4th floor, you're gonna step back another 20 feet. If you add a 5th floor, you're gonna go 20 more feet back. If you add a 6th floor, you're gonna go 20 more feet back. Because we're gonna make sure that the buildings, as they get taller, get further and further and further away from the property line. And they created an example, which is the type A, which we're following. So it's very objective. We actually like that because, oh, I apologize. I had thought I had everything set to be, so I wouldn't get a call. Yeah, unfortunately, alarms don't pay attention to that. So, you know, we like that because it used to be, hey, whatever you like or whatever you don't like, and that's really subjective. Now it's a very objective criteria, and it is the only criteria left in the code for establishing height.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anything additional for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much, thank you. All right, we're gonna go ahead and go to staff presentation. Just a heads up, we're gonna take a break at around 10:30, but presuming we're still in the hearing, so. Good morning.
Good morning, Marshall Robinson, Development Services, and I have been sworn.
Thank you. And before you get started, I do have a question. This is a PDR. Generally, when we see a PDR, we see a PSP. Is this not meet the level of detail required for a?
Well, it's actually a PDMU request,
Okay.
not a PDR.
Oh,
I prefer that Marcia go through the presentation, and after that, he can answer that question, or with his presentation, you're gonna get the answer to your question.
okay, thank you.
Again, good morning, Commissioners. My name is Marshall Robinson with Development Services, and I have been sworn. The applicant kind of mentioned and went over some of the particulars that are in my report. I'll just briefly describe them. So the property is located in Ellington. It's approximately 1/2 mile east of I-75 and Highway 301 North. The property also backs up to the Manatee River and is made up of 11.1 acres. As described by the applicant, the request is to rezone 3 parcels of property, each having its own zoning classification, A1, GC, and PDR, to a planned development mixed use or PDMU zoning classification, and the proposal does have an overall request of 143,000 square feet of uses proffered by the applicant, and also 250 residential units, along with an 80 boat slips for a marina water type use. The GDP is broken up in 2 phases. Phase 1 is shown as parcel A on the general development plan. That's where the 40,000 square feet of PDC uses proffered by the applicant is located. And then phase 2 is where parcel B is shown. And that's 8 acres of property, and that's 103,000 square feet of non-residential uses proffered by the applicant, along with 250 residential units. There are specific approval requests. The first specific approval request is from the entranceway requirement. The subject property is located within the entranceway and is required to preserve a minimum of 75% of trees over 24-inch DBH. The applicant has requested this requirement be reviewed as part of a preliminary and final site plan. The second specific approval request comes out of the CPA Special District for Open Space Requirements. Subject property lies in the CPA and is required 35% open space for residential development and 30% open space for non-residential. And the applicant is requesting an alternative open space requirement by committing to 25% open space for residential uses and 20% for non-residential uses. The third specific approval request is because the CPA also requires 50% of the required minimum open space be retained, and the natural vegetation of vegetative upland communities include an understory vegetation. The applicant requests an alternative to the 50% preservation requirement by committing to providing 0.10 acres of preserved vegetation in the vegetative upland community. Here's a look at the future land use category for the subject property, highlighted in the yellow. Maximum density allowed, as Mr. Goss pointed out, is 32 dwelling units per acre for mixed-use projects in the ROR future land use category. Also a 1.0 FAR for mixed-use development in the ROR. And provided or proposed by the applicant is 22.5 dwelling units per acre, and also 0.3 FAR overall for the 11.1 acres and the 143,000 square foot of non-residential. Here's the current zoning map. We see the three different zoning classifications for the three parcels. Also noted here is the CPA, and there's a small portion of the property that is within the coastal high hazard area. And here's a look at the aerial on those three parcels again. We also highlighted the adjacent properties to the west and to the east. Here you can see the mobile home park, which is a single-family mobile home development, and to the east is the Rain Tree subdivision. Here we see the zoning classifications for these adjacent properties. To the west, we've got that RSMH 6 single-family mobile home zoning designation. And to the east, we have the single-family detached zoning classification for RSF6 development and some RSF1 and some RSF3. And then as we go further to the east, we see more of that single-family mobile home zoning district. Here's a look at the ROR that was spoken about by the applicant. I do want to stop on this map here and just maybe talk about a couple of things. You know, the applicant had brought up some changes that had been made to the ROR future land use district to help it further the intent of that future land use category. And those changes in the ROR future land use district, while prevalent in a lot of areas, the one thing that's getting missed in that conversation on this map is that the subject property in white here, it's on the edge of that ROR future land use district. It's not out into the interior of an ROR where it can reap most of the benefits, maximizing the ROR allowable entitlements, such as 32 units per acre for density and a 1.0 FAR. You know, the comp plan is pretty clear about there's nothing in the comp plan that guarantees achieving maximum entitlements allowed in the future land use category. They're available if appropriate, but they're not guaranteed. And so when we look at that and we look at the geographical context of the subject property as it relates to the ROR future land use category, we see it's adjacent to where the development pattern picks up a residential future land use category in the RS or the Res 9 adjacent to the east. And we can see on the south side of 301 that the ROR stops short right there at the Rain Tree residential development. And then on the north side, it picks up to take in the library across the street and some commercial on up, but then it's not too much further until it stops, and the residential land use pattern picks up and carries on east. And so we take a look at the proposed GDP here, and the applicant's right, and staff has always said during the review of this application that the ROR the policies of the ROR and the allowable intensities and densities and the range of potential uses for the ROR are met here. But the objective standards that the applicant spoke about, it's important to keep in mind that those objective standards are minimums. They're minimum requirements. So when we take a look at the site plan, of course, we'll talk about the FDOT parcel in a moment, but we've got access points, 2 access points on 301. We also have what's being categorized or labeled as a secondary access off of 68th Street, which is along the northeast boundary there. I don't know if I've got a pointer here, but you guys couldn't see me point on it. But right there on 68th Street is the secondary access, and 68th Street is a private street. The applicant submitted a document where it's claimed that that document gives the applicant and the subject property access rights to that private street. We also see down on the south part of the property where the 80 slips for the boat marina water type use is proposed. And we see that, up in the top right, or, the north portion of the property is where the 3.1 acre parcel A is, and below that into the interior, the center of the subject property is parcel B, and that's where the 103,000 square feet of uses and the residential, 250 residential units are being proposed. And there is a setback exhibit that the applicant provided, and these are those objective standards. These are the minimum requirements just graphically illustrated out of LDC 401.5 for height compatibility. And the way it works is it's drawn out to basically gives you a setback for each different type of use. And what the applicant illustrated here are all the different PD uses, the PDR uses, the PDC uses, and the PDW uses, because he does have a water use, he does have a residential use, and he is also proposing a commercial use. So when we look to that height compatibility standard in 401.5, we see the minimum required setbacks based on height, and that's what those lines are to represent. Those lines are representing where the building would be set back at a given height for the structure. Here's some pictures of the site. Obviously, this is looking west down the sidewalk along the 301 frontage. This is looking into the adjacent mobile home development across the FDOT parcel. There's a Goodwill store on the east side of the site, on the east side of 68th Street, and that's looking into the project from the Goodwill driveway. This picture is looking down 68th, or looking north up 68th. And this is a look at the back off to the east. On the other side of those trees are where the single family homes are. And this is one of the canals that run behind the homes. I didn't walk on anybody's property. That lot was for sale and vacant. So I just walked over there and snapped a picture. Here's a look at the adjacent docks along the water frontage of the river. This is looking off to the east. There's some docks there. And then this is looking along the seawall along the water frontage off to the west. There's a long history with this project. It first got submitted to the county in 2018 on its initial submittal. Then in 2019, we did a version 2 review. And it's worth noting that in September of 2019, there was an appeal that was granted for this subject property. The appeal was to recognize that the property was not located within the coastal evacuation area. So I just wanted to make that note. And then in August 2020 is when we picked the review back up after it went cold for a little while. And then in October, we did our last version of review. We did receive a notice from the applicant on October 22nd that notified staff that we wanted to call the applicant in and sit down and have a meeting with the applicant to go over some of these issues that we were talking about. during the review, and this email let us know that, that they wanted to forego meeting with staff and that they'd like to go ahead and schedule a hearing date. And so at that time, when we got the notification, we stopped the review on the project, and we started processing it for our agendas and putting our hearing items together. And this is one of the items that kept us from being able to accept and approve a traffic impact study. The traffic impact study at that time was going through the review and being reviewed and analyzed, and there were still, I guess, some unresolved items in the review of that traffic study. And as a result of the notification to schedule it for a hearing and forego meeting with staff, the traffic study never was accepted by our Transportation Review Department. Wanted to call out just a couple of things here from the code. This is a comprehensive plan policy 2611. An application for a development order that proposes a use for intensity, height, density could be found incompatible on the use of land for the adjacent site and shall use techniques to mitigate potential incompatible characteristics of the proposed use. And then it lists a few mitigation techniques that it's referring to, such as building setbacks, innovative site design, appropriate building design, and density or intensity below the maximum. And again, I want to call out that they are below the maximums allowed in the ROR future land use category. But it's one of the things that drew the concern during this review. Again, we remember seeing the map of the future land use category, and it's right on the edge adjacent to Res 9. And so there we think that a use of some sort of transition out of the ROR into the Res 9 is in order here for this site-specific location. The LDC implements this policy with LDC Section 321.1 for applications. It says, a general development plan shall depict internal relationships between or among uses and activities proposed for their supporting systems and facilities in relation to the surrounding uses, activity systems, and facilities. The department director shall establish administrative procedures setting forth specific requirements for information to be submitted with any application for GDP, and that's what we were trying to do during the completeness review with the applicant. We never were opposed to what was being requested. The issue that we had was the incompatibility that we thought that this could have on the adjacent site and the adjacent single family by proposing a 9-story building. So what we wanted to see, and you can see here on the map, is we just wanted some more detail. We pushed for more detail. We don't have the orientation of the buildings. We don't have any footprints or placement or location for any of the buildings that might be proposed. And if you take a look at the uses that were permitted and prohibited in the use list proffered by the applicant, there is a wide range of uses that could potentially land on this piece of property, and there's no way to account for any combination of those uses that may end up ultimately on this site. And so we wanted from the applicant just more detail on the plan. If it meant that we needed an option A and an option B and an option C to try to give us an idea of how this site would function and operate, and then also give us a little bit of idea on what the scale of massing or the height, scale, and bulk for the property would be. So then that way we could put it in context as it's located adjacent to the single-family residential uses on both sides, on the edge of the ROR, adjacent to the Res 9, headed east out 301. And so that's really what we really got hung up on was with the review, and we preferred, or we had asked early on, you know, let's do a preliminary site plan. And Chairman Connerly, that's where we wanted this project to go. We wanted this project to come in with a PSP, so we had the level of detail so we could understand where the parking was going to be for 143,000 square feet of uses and 250 residential uses. We wanted to understand more about the 80-slip marina water use type that was going to be located on the river. Is that a standalone commercial where me and a couple of my buddies can pull up in a boat and hop out and go get some dinner, or how does that work? Or are these slips associated with the 250 units and the people that reside there? We just didn't know how that was to operate and what the function of that was going to be Also, when you talk about those water uses down on the river, it implicates things like fuel and offices and maybe a dock master, you know. And so we just didn't have a good idea about how that would all function. And so it raised some concern for us because it seems to me that, you know, in a location such as this in the ROR, where you're afforded this very wide range of uses that could potentially be permitted, and you are afforded these high FARs and high densities, that might be very well, you know, appropriate somewhere out in the interior of the ROR where they're surrounded by ROR-like uses, ROR-like densities, ROR-like intensities. The concern or the sensitivity at the adjoining property line might not be what it is with this given location. And that's the reason why I believe that the compatibility policies were not changed right along with the ROR future land use changes that the applicant spoke about. They made some changes to the ROR future land use, but they didn't make any changes to our comprehensive plan policies for compatibility. Those remain. And when we do review these types of projects, we have to comb through the comp plan and find out what policies are applicable here, and then we have to find out how do we implement those policies. And the intent of a plan development is to give you a plan. So you can demonstrate that there's a superior design in play for this plan that implements the policies found in the code, where you can put your finger on it and say, here's how we've addressed compatibility. And more times than not, for plans developments, they're done with the plan itself. And then it's also backed up with any code requirements that might carry forward into the entitlements of the project to help implement those policies found in the plan. And so we just felt like that's where this project fell short. We're not in disagreement or opposed to the vision of the use. We're not opposed to any of the uses that were proffered up by the applicant. Our only item of concern, I don't want to say only item, but the biggest one was just that this plan didn't demonstrate the impacts or the degree of impacts that could be created with a 9-story tall building nestled in between 2 single-family residential uses on the very edge of the ROR adjacent to the Res 9 future land use category. And here is a look at the setback exhibit. And I should point out that 401.5 in the Land Development Code does offer up 3 options on how to achieve that height compatibility. And this is what is known as the step-back approach, where you provide additional separation in addition to the minimum requirement based on your building height. So the higher you go up, the further it goes back, and that's what's being illustrated here with these diagrams. Here's Comp Plan Policy 2629, and this is where it talks about that gradual transition and in density and utilizing mitigation techniques. And we just felt like it's not a gradual transition to introduce 22.5 units per acre. And I should mention that this is a mixed-use project, so we are including the entire 11.1 acres. Even though there's no residential being proposed up in Parcel A or Phase 1 of the project, we do use the entire acreage of the mixed-use project to determine overall gross density and intensity. And we just didn't think that 22.5 units per acre was a gradual transition adjacent to a Res 9 future land use category that's capped at 9 units per acre and already developed with single-family residential or single-family detached residential. Plan Policy 2216 states that development regulations may restrict development potential to less than the maximum provided in the comp plan to address land use compatibility. Here again is a policy that's telling us, even though you may be permitted to go up to 32 dwelling units per acre, or you may be permitted a 1.0 FAR, this policy here clearly states that you're not guaranteed to achieve those. And for the reason is land use compatibility. And so we just felt if we were going to consider such a density given this location, we'd like to see some building orientations, maybe some design criteria that would go along with the entitlements of the approval for the project, just so we're comfortable in making sure that we did our due diligence to demonstrate or at least to get our head around the degree of impacts. Because it's hard to take a look at the site plan and then imagine a 9-story building and how big that might be and what's the scale of it and what kind of impacts could it potentially create to the adjoining property owners. I mean, this plan does not achieve that. And so leaning toward these policies is kind of where we felt like that, you know, the adequate amount of implementation for the comp plan policies were not present with this proposal. And the specific approval request, I just run through them here real quick again. These requests were all pretty much reviewed by our environmental planning section. And, you know, we had worked through our review for this for a good period of time. And some information that had been asked for by various departments just wasn't received, or we didn't get them in time before they decided they wanted a hearing date. And so it was determined, and I think it's spelled out in the staff report, that just not enough information was provided in order for staff to be able to support the request for the alternative requirements for these specific approval requests. And in your staff report, it's kind of spelled out here. And these are some of the items that were asked for and were needed to complete the review. And I just want to go back and talk about a couple of last things here. Get through these pictures. I apologize. So talking about the FDOT parcel, I mean, I am by no means an attorney, but when I first saw this, and first I came in on the review during, I think it was the version 3 review. But when I first looked at this, you know, I talked to staff about it, talked about it internally, and it was our understanding that, you know, if this 1.9 acre FDOT parcel was to be included into the PDMU project and serve the PDMU project and get credit for providing the requirements for the PDMU project, then this project should be within the boundaries of the GDP. I read through it. I did not read anything where the legal description for the FDOT parcel was included for the legal description of the proposed GDP. It's simply just an adjacent piece of property where the applicant does have a document that was submitted. It does spell out a settlement agreement, but I didn't read anything in those documents that allowed this property to provide for code requirements. I just didn't read anything that said that. I think we briefly mentioned it as a part of our RLS that we sent in. And so I guess we just disagree with the applicant in terms of that FDOT parcel being an appropriate procedural step for this GDP. And I think with that, I'll just close in saying that the negative, positive, and mitigating measures are all found in your staff report. Hope you all are familiar with those. And if you have any questions about anything in the staff report or anything in our staff presentation, I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Very good, thank you. I have a question, maybe it's probably best characterized as a summary of objection. With regard to the application, it's, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like staff is okay, says, or is indicating that it's consistent with the LDC, but saying that it's inconsistent with the comprehensive plan? Is that an appropriate characterization?
That's a fair assessment. It's a fair assessment. I think it all starts with the comprehensive plan and the lack of implementation of code requirements. Again, yes, there was no code requirement not being met, notwithstanding the specific approvals, but we just felt like that the plan was inadequate for the amount of detail that we needed to see those compatibility policies implemented in the comprehensive plan.
Okay, thank you. And then one of the things I'm trying to understand, if generally you would, many of the applications we see for a PDMU, and just for clarification, there is a reference to PDR in the alternative motion, but a PDMU application would generally have a preliminary site plan where there's detail. The land development code doesn't require that it be a
There's not a specific requirement that, requires you to do a preliminary site plan for PDMU projects, but there is some language, and forgive me, let me just find it in my notes here. The LDC in section 322A, it says an applicant may voluntarily proceed or be required to proceed directly to preliminary site plan approval where the board determines a general development plan will not provide adequate detail to assure compliance with this code and comprehensive plan. And so we were utilizing that piece of code regulation to try to get the preliminary site plan, because we had made it clear in our comments early on that we felt that the plan was inadequate with detail and information. And so we looked to that LDC section to give us guidance for a preliminary site plan request.
Okay. I think I understand the points. Any additional questions for
Yes.
Zeph? Mr. Ralph?
I don't see any notice, and maybe I missed it, that this is either in a 25 or a 100-year floodplain. Is it not?
I think that information, I think, Mr. Roth, is in my staff report, but I didn't bring it up here with me.
Well, just is it or isn't it?
Tom Gestenberg is in the staff room. We can call him.
Oh, Thomas, okay. Yeah.
Does anybody know off the top of their head?
I don't.
The 100-year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question.
Well, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman,
yeah.
people can't be yelling from the audience, and we have to get the question from staff answered. Here's
Mr.
the staff
Gosnell.
person.
There he is.
Mr. Gause, you can't.
Tom Gressenberger, you gonna?
Sorry, I just didn't bring that in. I had a lot on my mind. I wasn't tracking. that.
Okay.
Good, sir. All right. No worries. First off, for the record, and I'll drop this in a minute. For the record, Thomas Gerstenberger, Public Works Department, I have been sworn. Commissioner Roth, I did pick up part of your inquiry in the back regarding the 25-year and 100-year floodplains, so I'll go through the information that was included in the staff report. For this particular project, there is a portion along the river itself that is within the county 25-year floodplain. The flood stage for this particular portion of the river, since at this point the river is starting to spread out and widen out due to the interaction with the tidal component of the river out into the mouth of Tampa Bay. The 25-year flood stage is 1.73 feet NAVD, whereas the rainfall component of the present, and this something I'll go through a little bit further in a moment. The present FEMA effective flood insurance rate maps dating back to 2014, the rainfall component of the 100-year floodplain is at 2.6 feet. Now, as I just alluded to, there is also and I'll bring it up on the overhead just for reference. First off, Charles and Chris, thank you back there. Secondly, the document that I bring up on the overhead is a present letter of map revision that is in effect, that is with respect to this project area, and does amend or does remove portions of this project area from the existing 2014 effective flood insurance rate maps. What I will now bring up, and I've got an 11 by 17 of this, and that'll work, is the project area being here. And what you see on this map exhibit is the 2014 effective flood insurance rate maps, and those areas that are identified in red
on this map are areas that are delineated on the firm as being within the 100-year floodplain. However, due to this conditional letter of map revision, you can essentially treat these areas as outside of the 100-year floodplain based upon fill. That being said, the county and FEMA have been working for the past couple of years. It started back in 2018, I believe, if not even 2017, with respect to map amendment updates of the coastal flood mapping associated with the with Sarasota Bay, Tampa Bay, and the coastal portions of the riverine systems within Manatee County. What you see from this map exhibit that I just brought up is the preliminary firm data, which has gone through outreach meetings, which the county is soon to receive, maybe even within the next week or two, a letter from FEMA for the effective date of these new flood insurance rate maps within the next 6 months. What you will note on this map exhibit is there is some slight difference in the 100-year floodplain delineation within the project area. But the other thing to note is, and especially with respect to these elevations that are shown on this particular map exhibit, is that there is a revised and a higher 100-year flood stage associated with this project area. The letter of map revision that is now in place on this particular project area will be superseded by these increased 100-year flood stages associated with the project area. Therefore, any development of this project area will be required to comply with the floodplain regulations determined from these elevations as a base flood elevation of 8 and 9 feet. At this time, I'll be happy to address any further questions that the Planning Commission has regarding this project. Mr. Roth.
There's a map, page 16, which shows the description of the land, the fine sand, Lobe fine sand, etc. It appears that the majority of this property is what they call Soil Code 41, which is pits and dumps. 7 acres of the 11 some odd acres we're talking about. Could you tell me what that means, pits and dumps?
What I would imagine that is referring to is any type of spoiled material or even with the excavation of the DOT pond, any material that was excavated and utilized on site for fill. That certainly would be the case for, if you're looking back at the 2014 firm, even previous maps, have even got the previous aerials available. This is probably a good example of what you're referring to, Commissioner Roth. You can see on this particular 2003 aerial, areas where there's placement of fill. And then if we were to go back further in time to even the 1994 aerial, maybe even an earlier aerial I can bring up as well, but you'll see that there was an inlet at one time on this particular project area that has since been filled based upon the 2003 aerial. So that is what that classification is referring to, as any fill that has been brought or been placed on the property.
And that was a report prepared by the applicant's team, so we'll allow them to address that more appropriately.
So I guess my next question is, does that mean you can or cannot build on pits and dumps?
Commissioner Roth, as the chair just brought up, we can certainly have the applicant discuss further, but certainly that would be need to be further analyzed with the final site plan and construction plan submittals. Typically, a geotechnical report is submitted with a final site plan or construction plan submittal. The soil borings would go through and analyze the soil material that is in place, whether it is acceptable for building construction, for foundation construction to be placed over that material. That as I brought up, would be further analyzed with the final site plan and construction plan.
And Mr. Gerstenberger, wouldn't it be the burden of anybody submitting an application for construction to have a qualified professional make the determination if it's appropriate to build? It's not, the county's not going to dictate if it's a, not a protected habitat or wetland, anything other than that. It's not the county's typical position to make a determination of, the suitability of a site.
Mr. Chair, that is correct, certainly. That would be an analysis that the applicant, the owner, and obviously any construction would have to take account of and address as part of construction on this property.
Very good. I think that falls under the buyer beware category, so.
Certainly.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Rutledge.
Mr. Rutledge.
Mr. Gerstenberger, may I ask you, the incongruency with the lack of a site plan and some of the detail that the staff has mentioned in relationship to underwriting what they want to do, do you feel like you can adequately at this time recommend the transition based on the fact that you have not seen any of the plans? You've got this new updated water management condition and the information they provided. In other words, my concern a little bit is they've decided not to talk with staff, and it makes me uncomfortable that you, particularly because of the river, have not had a chance to discuss with them their plans, talk a little bit about what you're aware of. I don't think there's many people maybe any other people that are cognizant of the water conditions and requirements and expectations. And if they have not integrated their plan or recommendation to us with that, are you comfortable with where they're at? Would they have all the information?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Rutledge, it's quite typical on our end as far as staff's analysis and review of any particular project, whether it's for a pre-application meeting with a conceptual plan all the way through a final site plan, construction plan, when obviously the level of detail and the calculations involved in the latter stages of development review. However, that being said, typically when we're analyzing these projects, staff will make note or staff will bring to the attention of the applicant if there's any updates to flood insurance rate maps that are in the near future, or if there's any other challenges that might exist in the design or construction associated with any particular developments, and certainly the design requirements that would be associated with the development anywhere in the county, whether it be subject to a discharge flow reduction or floodplain mitigation due to identified 25-year or 100-year floodplains, any other design characteristics or criteria that might be required, like our 150% water quality treatment for outstanding Florida waters or the watershed protection areas. So that being said, there has certainly been as far as stormwater engineering staff, there has been discussion with the applicant regarding design requirements for this particular project. The applicant has made note of those particular design requirements. There is some notation that is included in the general development plan. Let me go ahead and bring that up. There is notation that is included within the general development plan with respect to meeting stormwater design criteria with any subsequent final site plan and construction plan submittals. There is a stormwater facility that has been identified within the project area on this general development plan. However, the applicant does note that there could also be additional stormwater facilities provided, and even the utilization of a stormwater vault. So with respect to those components, whether it be water quality treatment or attenuation, this being a general development plan, at this time, the applicant is only responsible for identifying intent. With respect to the 100-year floodplain, the applicant would certainly have to address any floodplain impacts within the riverine or the rainfall component of the 100-year floodplain, but not necessarily those requirements apply to the storm surge component of the 100-year floodplain. So that being said, as I just alluded to, there's already been discussion with respect to those criteria, whether they are with regards to water quality treatment, attenuation of runoff, or floodplain mitigation with respect to this particular development.
As always, enlightening. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you. And just to summarize what Mr. Gerstenberger said, for my clarification, the plan represented is the intent. We're not authorizing any construction. We're not approving a site plans, or obviously there's not a site plan provided. It's a general development plan, but there's no authorization to allow construction coming with this process. Is that? There's still a lot of technical analysis required to get to the point to allow construction, and they would have to meet the criteria at every step of the way. Is that kind of a summary that's appropriate to what you said?
Mr. Chair, that is correct. And in addition, this project would also be required to obtain an environmental resource permit through SWIFMUD, and in addition, meet the other components associated with development in the 100-year floodplain through the floodplain ordinance that just became effective within the past year.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, very good. I'm sorry, Mr. Heath.
Just not to dwell on the FDOT pond, and it's probably more a question for you. But
For whom? The applicant?
I forgot your name. Marshall. But are they using the acreage of the FDOT pond for the density calculation as well as the open space?
I don't think this is, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, the 1.9 acres was not figured into the calculation for density.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Anything additional for the for staff?
I had just one comment
Yes,
on
ma'am.
the pond. In your update memo, there's a proposed stipulation, C3, on the stormwater stipulations. And it basically says the county shall have no responsibility to resolve disputes between the owners of the stormwater pond, FDOT, and the owners of the PDMU Riverfront project regarding the use of stormwater pond as open space for the PDMU project. Now, in the agreement in FDOT dated December 2004, and FDOT always reserves the right, we can take everything back if we need it for a public purpose. So that's just in the event of that contingency, it's the applicant's risk if they're relying on that pond for open space. Our code doesn't prohibit it, so I can't say they can't do it. And they have appropriately excluded it from the boundaries of GDP, and they have to do that because they don't own it.
Yes, sir. All right. So, Ms. Schenk, to that point, if the DOT were to exercise their option and, I guess, remove the ability for the applicant to claim it as open space?
Well, that's not a decision FDOT makes regarding how all codes interpreted for open space. That's a decision the county makes.
All right.
FDOT just cares about the stormwater function of the pond for the runoff.
Very good. Thank you. Definitely a unique situation. So, all right.
Can I ask Mr. Robinson one other question?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Rob, first of all, I appreciate very much how you, in my opinion, kind of balanced out the applicant's interests and your professional obligations. And I think it should be appreciated by everybody that sees this going on. We don't always agree, and we don't always want to do the same things. I do think that it makes me a bit uncomfortable when the staff doesn't recommend a process, because we recommend a lot of stuff, and some of it has some challenges. I like very much the use and the modification and the design. I think the planning that we've done is important. But do you feel somewhat of a higher expectation of a location that is making such a big transition from kind of rural, pre-70s type land and the surrounding use to a more contemporary use? I mean, is part of the review of this the transition from what it was or what it is currently today, which is not developed, to something substantially different, a changing complex that goes with the 10 lanes and all that?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. Yeah, we understand, the value of this location. We understand the value of what it means to be in the ROR future land use. And anybody who's fortunate enough to own property in the ROR is certainly going to try to take advantage of all that comes with the ROR future land use and also all that comes with something like a mixed-use plan development. So, we understand, that this is a very valuable location. But at the end of the day, it's really the uncertainty. Again, as mentioned before, Commissioner, we are more than happy to try to make this project work and to be able to get the applicants where they want to be. But at the same time, we also want to make sure that we're not neglecting our responsibilities for review of the surrounding properties. And so, it really just did come down to the uncertainty of how this site would function and how this site would create impacts, if any. But we had no demonstration of that. And so, for those reasons, it was really just a lack of detail on the plan that gave us a good deal of confidence knowing that we've reviewed this project against our policies and that we could put our finger on implementation of those policies to determine consistency. I don't know if I answered your question, but that really was the basis of our review.
Yeah. No, that's very helpful because I understand it's not really we're against the project. It's not really that we don't like some of the things that are going on. It's some uncertainty. And I do think in these transition, if you're the point man on a charge, your risk is much higher and it's much more difficult. And I think that's a question I have for this developer. That was a great answer. I appreciate it, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, very good. Anything further for staff? All right, I'm going to go ahead and call a recess. We're going to take a 10-minute recess. We'll come back, and then we'll open it up for public comment. Thank you.
I've got the, turn down the job for $15.
We missing Mr. Roth. All right, I'm going to go ahead and, yeah. All right, we're going to go ahead and call the meeting back to order. We're at the point in the hearing where we have opportunity for public comment. I know, Ms. Petroff, it's been requested that you get an additional, or you get 10 minutes for comment. So I'll go ahead and call the speaker cards that I have right now. The first card I have is Ed Tricilia. Very good. Come forward, state your name, and that you have been sworn.
Ed?
No, at the, I'm sorry.
My name is Ed Trinzilla, and I have been sworn.
Very good, thank you.
I reside in the Raintree Inlet, and my home is adjacent to the PDMU. My concerns have to deal with the 80 slip marina, fuel dock, and pump out station. My dock in length is 105 feet from shore. It parallels with the PDMU. The depth, as I left my home this morning at 105 feet off the shore, was 6 inches. Paralleling with the PDMU, that puts the tidal flow the same as the PDMU. So the only channels that exist are on the opposite side of the river or in dead center of the river. So I can't imagine the environmental impact that this is going to have on the amount of bottom that has to be removed for not only the 80 slip marina, but as well for the channels. We also have adjacent, well, on the east side of the PDMU is an inlet. As discussed with Mr. Maloney, he has no intention on addressing the shortcomings of that present inlet, only being 45 foot, that's clear without any docks that are presently installed by the Raintree people. We have some of the walls of that inlet are collapsed or have collapsed. It's contributing a tremendous amount of silt from the ground into the bottom, causing the bottom to be really, really shallow, or causing the tides to be shallow. We have, let's see, the boating use that's there right now consists of kayaks and a 22-foot type boat. And the 22-foot boat is at the beginning of the channel where it's most deep. I shudder to think with an 80-foot marina abutting this inlet, what havoc is going to be created when just through human nature, people are going to say, well, let's go take a look up that channel. And they're going to run hard aground, and that's going to create one heck of a hassle with not only the people there, but as well as with trying to get them off the bars. After all is said and done, should they turn around and grant all of this, the 80-foot marina, the inlets or the canals in and out, myself, I have just this feeling of having to be in a place where it's peaceful, it's serene. We now have 80-foot slip or 80 slip marina, and the traffic that's going to be involved there, and the pollution that's going to be created there, and engine noise, and the exhaust from the boats themselves. It's really going to take what is a beautiful place for me and for many of the other people along that waterfront, and it's going to turn it into Times Square on New Year's Eve, on a holiday. And I just can't imagine me being 105 foot from shore, being parallel to an 80-foot marina, and having boats coming and going is going to be turning my wonderful place into a real nightmare. And so I hope you people consider not approving that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. The next speaker card I have is Sarah Severson. Again, if you could come forward and state your name and that you have been sworn. I'm sorry, Stevenson.
Hi, my name is Sarah Stevenson.
Thank you.
I've been sworn. Happy New Year to you all, and thank you for your service to Manatee County. I have a couple of comments, one of which is, I think the nail was hit on the head when they talked about the transition zone. I live in Raintree Inlet, and there's really not a transition zone if they build that building as close as they're going to. Even though it seems like it could be far away, it's really pretty close, and the noise factor will impact the residents there. So I'm hoping that they will go back to the drawing board and do a little bit better plan. It would be ideal, you know, if they did single family like us, but I know that's not the way it's zoned, and the plan would be to have us be in harmony together. So, you know, it'd be a great place for a Vest Pocket Park, but I know that's not possible. Anyhow, when I think of the current situation, it reminds me of like a Mississippi, you know, casino coming right up against Mayberry. If it's possible that they could do a transition zone, that would be great. And the other thing that I would like to comment on is I'm employed by the FDOT, and I do not have never heard of a recreational zone, a recreational use of any of our ponds. Most of them are behind lock and key. So I don't know that they allow, and I do have a plan where they showed this. I don't know if I can show it to you.
Anything you show, you have to provide for the public record, so you have to give it to the clerk. You
Okay.
You do have the ability to show, but then you have to.
Okay, well, I can provide it at some point, but it does say for recreational uses, and I don't think if the FDOT owns it, they're going to allow people to jog around it and stuff like that. So that's it. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. And if there's anything you wish to have in the record, you can just send it to the, I don't know, Marshall, and it ends up in the, into the application package that would go to the board. So, all right, the next speaker card I have is Patricia Petrov. Good morning, and if you could state your name and that you have been sworn, and you'll have 10 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Patricia Petrov. I have been sworn. I have been retained by the Raintree Inlet HOA. I have given a letter to the clerk for her file. I listened with interest to Mr. Vogler's presentation. It's always fun to listen to Ed. He deemed this to be a creative, forward-thinking plan for development. I disagree. It is a bubble plan putting as much density and intensity of use as humanly possible. My personal belief with my experience is there's no way to get all of what he's asking for anywhere near on that property. You know, once you put in the roads, the stormwater ponds, the setbacks, the this, the that, all of that is not going to fit. So basically what this developer is asking you to do is to give him a pass with a rezone that will double the density from what is normally allowed in the ROR district, you know, with any other kind of zoning, PDR, PDC, what have you. You're doubling the density from 16 to 32 units, and you're doubling the intensity of use from a 0.5 to a 1.0. He's asking you to do this so he can market this property to find out what might be the highest and best use. That's really not the way we're supposed to do this with PDR plans. PDR plans or PDMU plans, any kind of plan development, is supposed to give all of us some insight into where things are going to be, where the buildings are. Are the buildings going to be compatible? You know, does it mesh with what is existing in the neighborhood? This is an infill property. It's not a 1,000-acre DRI where, yes, I have done general development plans on 1,000-acre projects all over the county. This is 11 acres between two single-family uses with a Goodwill on the corner, and I think that Goodwill used to be a bank. So I would suggest to you to stay with the staff's recommendation of denial, because there is just not enough information for me, my client, anybody who lives close to it, to have any clue what's going to happen. Is it going to be a commercial marina? Is it not? That changes the traffic implications. Is there going to be a rooftop restaurant on top of one of the buildings? That changes the noise implications. There are so many implications with this project that can't be analyzed because of the type of pie-in-the-sky bubble plan that you've been given. Yes, it is zoned, or future land use is ROR. Yes, ROR allows flexibility. Nobody's arguing that maybe a different zoning category might be appropriate here, but to pick a zoning category that is so out of sync with the adjacent uses is, well, to pick the zoning category and then ask for all the maximum uses in that zoning category, PDMU, I believe to be out of sync with what our comprehensive plan and zoning plan would require in this instance. I agree with Mr. Robinson. It is on the edge of your ROR district, so that needs to also be taken into consideration. With respect to the FDOT pond, gosh, why didn't I think of that 40 years ago, to use property that was purchased for over $250,000 as open space? I've been doing this a long time, and I have never used someone else's property to support the open space for any of my clients' property. That creates a really dangerous precedent. I don't think the comment or the stipulation that Ms. Schenk suggested is an appropriate response to, oh, let the two parties figure it out. I'm not even sure DOT knows that this property owner is asking that the county approve their property for open space use. I have a copy of the agreement. I've read it. I agree with Mr. Marshall. Basically, that agreement appeared to give the then developer, owner, I'm not sure if there was even a development plan, but it gave them some rights to buffer that pond to make it more attractive for their future needs. And it also gave them some rights to put some turnarounds if necessary. It doesn't give them the right to use it for open space. I mean, I also agree with Mr. Vogler, which is kind of not an often thing for me. It's not a well-drafted agreement, but I don't think it can be interpreted to the point that, oh yeah, we sold it to DOT for, oh, let me see here, $763,410,000, but we get to use it for open space? No, I'm sorry, I don't agree with that, and neither should you. Another issue that has not been raised, it was mentioned, but glossed over, 68th Drive East is a private road. It's a private road. It's part of the Raintree Inlet subdivision. Private, 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 private. There is an easement between different parties that allowed what is now being, I think, called Parcel A, where the Goodwill is. There is an easement that grants access from the private road, because private road goes to 301, so the Goodwill parcel, however large it is, I think it's at 3.1 acres, does have access by easement. The rest of the property does not appear to have access by easement. And the reason I use the word do not appear, or does not appear, is because there is no sketch with the recorded easement document is a bunch of meets and bounds legal descriptions. But yesterday I went back through the property appraiser's history of sales, and I checked the names of the people who were parties to the easement, because obviously they owned the property. And the only ones that kind of went through were Mr. Berger and Mr. Baker, and Mr. Berger owned the two properties on either side, on US 301, either side of 68, and it said in that easement that Mr. Berger was going to sell one of the properties to Mr. Baker, and he did that, and those were the only two names that showed up, and none of the names in the easement showed up for parcel B, that additional 8 acres. It is my position that the county cannot approve that as a secondary means of access for the entire project, because that increases the burden on the easement way beyond what was contemplated by the signers and participants in that easement. The easement contains a requirement for each parcel to contribute a certain number of dollars, percentage, based upon, percentages, if that street ever needs to be redone. If you allow 250 units and an additional 143,000 square feet and an 80-slip marina that possibly could be commercial to be put on that property, that does increase the burden put on that easement. And that has not been negotiated with Raintree at all. In closing, I would suggest that this is not the right general development plan for you to approve. I think it's too dense, too intense, and it doesn't give anybody enough information to make reasonable, educated decisions. One of the worst problems here is that if this gets approved, then all the rest of the plans, the preliminary site plan can be done administratively and not in a public hearing. So that takes away my client's rights to specifically object to very detailed parts of the plan. I would respectfully request that you deny this and keep with the staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Petroff, can you please clarify, did you say 68th Drive is a private right-of-way or
It's
private?
a private street. I've got a copy of the plat. The plat is in Plat Book 23, it looks like page 152. It could be 132. No, 152. I'm happy to put that in the record, but it is a private street. It's part of the subdivision owned by the HOA.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And I'll put this in the record for the staff.
Thank you. All right, those were the speaker cards I had. Is there anybody else who wishes to come forward and make a comment regarding this application? If so, please start moving in that direction. Again, you'll need to state your name and that you have been sworn.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to lay on the record if Mr. Galvano could be prepared when we get to staff summary
Yes, ma'am.
to address why they're not signing off on the traffic study, because that relies on the private street for access. There's no testimony on that.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Very good. Good morning.
Good morning.
Still
My name
morning.
is Joanne Myers. I'm a resident of Palm Grove Mobile Home Park, right next to the property. And I've got a document.
Have you been sworn?
I have been sworn.
Okay. Thank you.
I've got a document that I'd like to submit in addition to a response for this and the signature of 57 residents of our park. And we respectfully request that you deny this application.
Very good. Thank
Thank
you. And
you.
if you could provide that
I
to
will
the
do-
clerk and it'll be entered into the record. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Again, anybody else who wishes to come forward? Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Courtney Moody. I have been sworn.
Thank you.
I am also a resident of Raintree Inlet, and I have a petition of 224 signatures asking you to not rezone this land. This may not seem like a lot, but I can only share our petition so many times on my personal Facebook page. I have been at the library almost every Tuesday, starting in January. I am only one person. I work. I can only be there so much. Almost every person I come in contact with, they don't know about this. When they hear about it, they say, "Oh no, please don't." And something else I would like to bring to your attention is almost everyone I speak to, they're very disappointed. They say, "Well, good luck, I will sign," but they won't listen to us. They won't listen to me. And I think that's a poor reflection. I think this is a great opportunity to show that you do care about the people in this community. 224 people of the people that we were able to reach out to with such limited resources said, "Please listen to us, please. This does not belong here. We are a small area. We don't need to have high rises to be considered a success. We have small businesses that will be affected due to the commercial aspect. The traffic will be impacted heavily. I know me trying to leave my street, I can sit there for as long as 10 to 20 minutes trying to get out of 68th Drive East onto US 301, and this will only double that impact. We respectfully are asking you, 224 individuals, residents and visitors who love this area, to please listen to us. Do not rezone this. This is not the right project. Again, like Ms. Stevenson mentioned, a park, of course, would be great, but even so, a single resident facility would be better than this that just is not transitioned well into our areas. Thank you. Yes, it is.
We're going to put it in the record.
Thank,
Okay, we're submitting the petition to the record as well.
very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, is there anybody else who wishes to come forward and make a comment or statement regarding this application? Again, if you would, please come forward, state your name and that you have been sworn.
My name is Richard Moody. I am a resident and member of the Raintree Inlet Homeowners Association. And good morning.
And you have been sworn.
And I have been sworn, yes.
Thank you.
And thank you all for your positions and everything you do for the county. I'd like to just reiterate that we agree with the staff. This is really a monstrosity in between two residential communities. We have Palm Grove, as you already heard the statement. Palm Grove, Pelican Pier, I have residents from there who also injected their disapproval of this. We have with Raintree Inlet, we're the 19 single-family homes. Everybody tries to call the waterway a canal. It is actually just an inlet. It's only been approved ever for dredging for 24 inches. And then we have Colony Cove just right adjacent to us, which is another mobile home residence, and we have Ridgewood by the library across the street, which is also totally residential mobile home park. This is totally out of place for this area. I noticed that the applicant mentioned the Hampton Inn and its height. That's like the highest building in the area off of I-75. And this building, that the 9-story they're projecting, is definitely over the tree line. That Hampton Inn, if you look at the tree line, there is nothing in the whole area as far as you can see over the ancient oak tree line. And this would go over that tree line and just be an eyesore in that whole area. Also, the sunlight that from the west, we would be blocking sunlight after a certain period of time from the angle of that 9-story building, and will darken our back of our homes that are fronted on the inlet. And we feel that that parcel, the parcel A parcel that has the easement for the entryway, yes, there's a Goodwill on the other side that has that easement, and that is for a single business entity. The only thing that easement was provided for, original intent, was for only a single business or a single entity on that lot, not as a 4-story retail establishment where that entryway would be used for trucks and loading and service. Also, like they said, that would be more wear and tear. The amount of money that was deemed to be a percentage of payment for the use of that property would then go way out of scale for the original intent. We should, and thank you very much, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, again, and is there anybody else who wishes to come forward, make a comment or statement regarding this application? Anyone at all? Okay, we're going to go ahead and close the public comment portion of the hearing and open it up for some questions. I believe to Ms. Schenk's point earlier, there's some information related to the traffic study that was it Mr. Galliano, is it correct to characterize it as it was deemed insufficient?
Nelson Galliano, Transportation Planning, and I have concern.
Thank you.
As the staff report states, the applicant provided a traffic impact statement for the rezoning application to gauge the maximum impacts associated to the allowable uses. At this time, the TIS does not address the comprehensive plan requirements and has not provided sufficient information to determine whether the potential impacted segment of US 301 will have sufficiency capacity for the proposed project impacts. Do you have another question?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Well, so as I understand, you're saying that US 301 wasn't studied appropriately?
No, what I am saying is that the information provided on the traffic study is not enough to analyze and to state how will be the impact on the US 301, because the study is incomplete.
Okay, and what's the analysis on the private road? And is there anything done on that or
This
not?
is because this is a traffic impact statements, there are no access analysis. It will be part of the site plan or final site plan stage. It means when they submit documentation for concurrency, the operation analysis will be in place as part of the traffic study.
And the analysis would then include the information associated with the private drive, the turn lane analysis, and things such as that?
At the time of the concurrency, they need to submit some type of agreement between the private parties in order to understand how will be the operation of the access on the private road.
Okay. And if they cannot present an agreement, is that how you described it?
Right now, we don't have any agreement in hand to specify what to do with the access.
Okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Roth.
So based on where they are right now with whatever's missing and so forth, do they or do they not have to submit the rest of it?
Mr. Roth, can you speak into the?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Based on where they are now and with what is missing from their current plan, does that get resolved at the Board of County Commissioners or not?
We'll ask staff to provide a understanding of process from this point, should it go forward.
I think really
approved.
you have to ask the applicant, because I've never seen a TIA be incomplete.
No, I'm not talking about that.
So it won't be resolved before the board meeting if they can't complete it now.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the application as a whole. Let me ask the question, restate the question, so I make sure I understood what you were asking, so we're pointed in the right direction. It's, I think, Mr. Roth, what you were asking, is there going to be an opportunity between now and when it goes to the Board of County Commissioners, who will actually make the official approval or denial, that there's opportunity to have additional information associated with the site plan, where detail would be added at that point? Is that what you're asking?
In essence, this could not be approved as it is by the county commissioners, is what I'm saying. And therefore, they will have to submit the rest of the information at that time.
Well,
or not.
that's going to be up to the commissioners if it's deemed sufficient, yeah. So I think we understand your question is, I think it's in a roundabout way of asking, is there enough information for us to make a determination, to make a recommendation? So that's what I took from your question. All right, any other questions for staff? If not, we're going to go ahead and proceed with the process and try to protect the due process for the hearing, which will be staff closing comments, then we'll go to applicant rebuttal, and then close the hearing after that. So any other questions for staff? Okay.
Well, I had one.
Yes,
Does
ma'am.
the applicant need specific approval? There's no second means of access for units over 100 feet, over 100 units? How's that met?
If they don't have the second means of access, they need to provide the second means of access. And right now, the second means of access is showing through the private road. But they don't have a specific approval. They have specific approvals related to environmental, buffers and open space, and environmental review planning determined that they don't have enough information to support their request.
Right.
Well, that's something the applicant has to address, because over 100 units, you need second means of access, and that's an objective standard.
Very good. So, and Ms. Schenk, I would presume if they can't provide a second means of access, they're only getting 99 units, regardless of what happens.
Yeah, I mean,
All right. Again, any staff closing comments?
We would like to point that we use the overall density because it's a unified project and is 22 dwelling units per acre. But the parcel B is proposing, if you isolated the parcel B, 31 dwelling units per acre. That is almost the maximum that is allowed with the ROR for a mixed-use project.
Okay.
On 8 acres, okay?
Okay.
The other stuff that we would like to point at is like, we agree that the uses are allowed, that the intensity is allowed, but we don't have any implementation more than the basic stuff with height to analyze that how compatibility gonna be provided. And to give you a simple example, with 500 units, the proposal gonna require 250 units gonna require 525 parking spaces. If we do a basic calculation, it's 2 acres for parking spaces. In this 11-acre parcel, they're gonna require parking structures. And we don't know anything about, it's gonna be 1 building, 10 buildings, gonna be the location, gonna create a shadow impact in the near properties. We don't know if Bob Sleep's gonna be private, gonna be public. We don't know. It's a total uncertainty. We are not clear about what's gonna be the impacts in adjacent properties, the impact on the roads, and is for that reason we think that it's not in compliance with the compatibility portion of the comprehensive plan, and we requested a preliminary site plan, and the applicant elect or choose to go direct to the board.
Okay, thank you.
so, Mr. Chair, just one question for Marsha Rosina. So the application was not deemed sufficient by staff? Is that what you were saying?
Yes, we couldn't support the specific approvals because we asked additional information and we don't have it. Transportation doesn't have the approved traffic easement statement, and us for the land use, we don't have the information that we need to prove that the site could be comparable with adjacent properties, and we didn't deem sufficient this application.
Very good. All right, that concludes the staff closing comments. Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go to applicant rebuttal, and then we'll go to deliberation.
Hi, my name is Ed Vogler. I have been sworn. I told you we're going to have fun today. It's easy to be against projects, It's very hard to be a visionary in a transformational area of the county that is planned for ROR and the types of intensities that are permitted. These particular landowners elected to come here. If you remember what I said, I always hate the fact that we get like 15 minutes and then there's 105 minutes of, intense complaint, and staff is unlimited in their time and so forth. So we might need just a few more minutes in terms of rebuttal.
Yeah, I recommend additional time to grant the applicant.
No, I,
Rebuttal time.
Mr. Vogler, I've always had a desire to hear everything.
No,
this-
and
this
I,
on the record.
I know that. I'm just observing that because I know Mr. Meyer wants to make some comments, and I'm compelled to make a few.
No, please.
And Mr. Meyer is the owner representative here today, and so it is difficult. And just a couple of points. The mobile home park.
Who said that? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
So
ma'am.
how much time am I granting him?
We'll just
Wing
play
it?
it. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
If we get filibuster, we'll.
Fontana, take your finger off the button, girlfriend. Anyway, I'm sorry. I shouldn't be flippant, but yeah. So just a few points. The mobile home park residents objected. The mobile home park owners each submitted letters of support. So that's an interesting dynamic. I think the other point is that this is the overriding point. It's the authorizations to bring a GDP to this board that exist in the codes. And this is what the landowners wanted to do, because they wanted to put a parameter around the design. So for example, if you're an architect and someone comes to you and says, hey, I'd like you to design uses, hotel, mixed-use, condominium, structured parking, and so forth. We have to meet these objective setbacks as we go up. As we go up, we have to have a birthday cake sort of scenario. But I don't know how many units are allowed. I don't know how many square feet are allowed. I don't know what the height is allowed. How would you do that? So Mr. Robinson says, well, we want option A, and maybe option B, and maybe option C. I think that's what the gentleman said. And so I would ask you, and I would like you to ask him, what do you think is the proper height for this area? And so you see the problem that a landowner has in terms of how do you go forward? And I think they've had some frustration with this. Say, do you like this? No, we don't like that. Go back. Do you like this? No, we don't like that. And so this represents a process problem. And so you have to ask yourself, how can you make all of these changes? How can a county make all of these changes in an ROR and say, we're gonna go from 9 units an acre to 32 units an acre if you do mixed use? This is the incentive that we're creating to you, Mr. Developer. This is our vision for this area. This is the county's vision, right? So the landowner comes along and he tries to fit his project and get a parameter so that he can know exactly what it should be, but then you go forward in the review and you don't get that type of feedback until you present a preliminary plan. Now, I wasn't involved, but I'm told, and this can be further testified, that our planning representatives asked the staff, is there anything we can do short of a PSP that you would support? And the answer was no. And so the landowner elected to come to this board and have this hearing today. And so here we are. And I'm also told that the traffic information is been supplied. We have our traffic engineer here, and I don't want to burn up our time with this, but he told me that just now, and they've completed a full report with all the analysis. It's just that when we elected to come to the board, I believe the county stopped reviewing it. And so this is just a troubling process. And I think we should conclude with the idea that there's an alternative motion that's been presented to you. And we recommend that you approve that alternative motion today. And I want to give Ms. Petroff comfort because one of the stipulations in that alternative motion is that ultimately any PSP that is brought forward, preliminary site plan, would require Board of County Commissioners approval, so she would have her right to delve into all the details and present that to the board. That's stipulation number 1 of the alternate motion. And so in conclusion, I think you can see that the density and the intensity and the type of project and the uses and the location in the ROR are not objectionable. The objection it really is there's not enough detail in the GDP. You can't use that process. We really need PSP, and that's not a mandatory requirement. As a matter of fact, I wrote down the quote from Mr. Robinson. There's no code requirement that is not being met, but we just don't have enough information. So I'd like you to hear from Mr. Meyer for just a couple of minutes, and he's the landowner.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chuck Meyer. I have not been sworn in.
Okay. All right.
Do you swear or affirm that the factual statements and factual representations you're about to present to the planning commission will be truthful and accurate?
I do.
Thank you.
I am Chuck Meyer. I am one of the landowners. I want to start with this concept in mind. The worst thing that could happen to us as landowners is for us to go home today and be told to do this all over again. What we're here in front of you, the planning committee, is, there's like 4 words that come to mind. We're searching for parameters, we're searching for guide rails, we're searching for guideposts, we're searching for direction. With that in mind, and Mr. Vogler had mentioned this, we do have some letters of support. And in those outside third-party words, I'd like to just read a couple of just real quick excerpts from them. North Star Lodging, which is the Spring Hill Suites by Marriott, which is just down the road here. Last year, we completed the construction of Spring Hill Suites by Marriott in downtown Bradenton. It's an 8-story, 130-room, beautiful hotel with waterfront views. And specific to our piece of property, the gentleman writes, given the fact that there is no waterfront hotel in this area of Manatee County and there has been no hotels built in this area for 15 years, I believe our hotel concept will be as successful at this location. Again, just the end user is important in this whole GDP process. I have the letters from Pelican Pier Mobile Home Park and Palm Grove. I think the gentleman from Pelican Pier sums it up best. I am the owner of Pelican Pier Mobile Home Park, which is located a few blocks west of the site. I'm very familiar with the changing nature of this area, and it is changing. There's a reason why there's ROR, future land use. As a developer, I applaud the changes to the comprehensive plan and land development code, which increase density, intensity, and height for certain areas of the county. I believe those are much needed changes that will make the county more competitive. The project seems to be exactly what the county planners envisioned when it revised the comprehensive plan to allow greater density and to encourage more mixed-use projects, which this is. I support approving greater height for this project to ensure efficient building layout that preserves the waterfront views. These gentlemen are owners of a very successful mobile home park. They understand, again, the word changing and the ROR, future land use. And I think in fairness to us as the owners, I think they know that theirs is not going to be a mobile home park forever. It's just not. Again, talking to another potential end user is Doc Ford's, very successful four-chain restaurant. Just a quick excerpt from them. I reviewed the general development plan, spoke with the owner about the process and estimated timeline for approval. I was pleased to learn that this type of approval allows us the flexibility and time to continue to work with the owner and other end users to design the best building layout that integrates the various uses. I don't think it could be said better than that. I wish those were my words. I believe our project is exactly the type of project that Manatee County wanted to promote when it revised the comp plan to grant more density and intensity. I believe our project will create hundreds of permanent jobs and millions of dollars in tax revenue. I think it's fair to state that the Manatee County riverfront is underutilized. There is a need for boat slips. The market, the end user in relation with the comp plan will be the dictator of what this project should be. We are not hoteliers. We're not restaurateurs. We're not condo developers. You know, the GDP was written for a certain reason, to provide the flexibility to go out there and let the end user, in conjunction with the comp plan, determine the final location of buildings, the height of them, et cetera, et cetera. The guardrails that hopefully you impose on us today and dictate will control what our site plan looks like. And again, we're at the GDP process. We're not at preliminary site plan. We're not at final site plan. Let me close by saying again, reiterating what I start with, the worst thing that could happen for us today is to leave here today without any direction from you. We're looking for that direction. We can't design an effective site plan without knowing height, without knowing density, and those kind of things. This is mixed use. Manatee County was smart enough to codify in the comp plan this, mixed use along with GDP. They have the steps, the processes. It's a stepping stone. It's GDP, it's preliminary site plan, it's final site plan. And in closing, I think arguably this is one of the most unique properties in Manatee County. We're waterfront, we're flood zone X, we're on a major thoroughfare. If the GDP wasn't written for this, I don't know what it is. And again, it is a stepping stone. So please, we're asking you to help us with the parameters to move forward to the next process, which is the preliminary site plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and close the public hearing and open it up for discussion, deliberation, thoughts on this. Anyone, including Mr. Rutledge?
Yeah, I'd like to start. First of all, I've been on the other side of the dais most of my career, and I sense the developer's frustration. I'm very excited about the plan. I think it is the transitional point. I appreciate Ms. Moody, I think, coming up and doing the work she did. I think she's just proven that this system works. If you think we're not listening to you, you don't know us. Listen, that's the kind of stuff we need to know. So thanks for that. But having been on the other side of this, I think one of the challenges is when you have a piece of property like this, it's kind of a beautiful diamond, you say, okay, I'm going to cut it into this design, and you don't really know at the end exactly all the cuts that it will take. So I'm empathetic to that commentary. I do think this was designed so that you could do that. But I go back to my original statement. It's very hard to be the first one out. I tore down a mall in a city that loved that mall, and it was very difficult. They made the test very hard, but we got it done. It was a huge success. And so I think if you don't think there's a challenge in being the first one into that area making the change, you didn't gauge the situation well. Having said that, I also think our staff is always in the game of trying to get things done. I think taxes are important. I think jobs are important. I know the restaurant you're talking about. I know the hotels you're talking about. I do think the challenge is they can be very demanding, and those capital investments that they're going to make are going to be for their own best interests. And no offense, that may not be in the best interest of the community. So I think that's why we have the team that we have. Mr. Robinson, I think, is not negative. I didn't get a sense of negativity from anybody. There is some uncertainty. And Mr. Vogler, it's so always good to see you come before us, because I know it'll be a creative challenge. So I think there's more work to be done. I like the project. I want it to go forward. I think there are a lot of questions. Access roads, who handles the decisions on how the boat systems work? Who's going to be in that? I just think there's still a lot more things to answer. I have a very positive outlook. I think our staff will act professionally, supportive, and do the right thing. I also think it's a complicated process, and if you thought you could walk in and get all these things just kind of signed off on a first visit, I don't know. I've never really had that good fortune. Maybe it just is your approach, but I like it. I want it to go forward, but I'm not sure I can vote for it because of the uncertainty.
All right, thank you. Any other thoughts, Mr. Smock?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of those comments were just made. You know, when you say this is a visionary plan, this is truly a visionary plan, and sometimes you have to bring more vision to the plan when you're presenting it. I understand the homeowners and their concerns. You know, I'm dealing with commercial development next to me, so you hate to see that happen. But the reality is that it does happen, especially in a location like that. Being able to present the idea of what they're going to be looking at in the future for the rest of their lives if they chose to continue to live in those homes makes that sell a little bit easier. Maybe sitting down and hammering out details on use of that road and a maintenance agreement that you're going to be providing long-term maintenance and accessibility, showing them that you know, obviously putting that much residence there, there's going to be a light that's going to be required. So access for those residents, when it gets there, you know, it's going to be requiring a light to be able to maintain traffic flow. Those are important things that to paint those brush strokes with that vision. I think it's a neat concept. Whether it's going to be 9 stories or 7 stories, I don't know. You know, it's 11 acres, and there's the whole proverbial 5-gallon bucket that we're dealing with. So show us something that will fit in that 5-gallon bucket, and it'll go a lot further.
Very good. Anything further?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Roth?
there is an attachment number 9, which is called the alternative motion. That's where I would go. It basically says, let's resolve this with this motion. These are the things we need to do that we have yet to have done. I would go for it if that's the way we go.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts? Just in general, I agree that you know, I probably not appease anybody here, but I think it's likely to happen at some point, and it'd probably be an exciting project. But that's one hand. The other hand, I feel like there's not enough information. The concern I have, I feel like it's consistent with the land development code, but it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan with regard to addressing some of the concerns that were mentioned. While the GDP process is allowed, I don't think that's the best mechanism for such a complex and difficult project to address these issues. It would have been more appropriate, I think, to either do a straight zoning or to do a preliminary site plan where there's more detail. So that's just the thoughts that I've had while I've heard the testimony and the presentation. It seems like there's questions that need to be answered. One additional thought, the fact that there was a proffered stipulation that this be presented back to or brought back to the board as a PSP, it seems somewhat of an admission to me that there's additional information needed. So I don't understand why we didn't get it the first time around. So that's just my thoughts. So anything further? If not, Chair will entertain a motion. Anyone?
I just like to throw this out, and perhaps Councilor Shank will help me, but she always does. I would like to move to deny the request as submitted with the stipulation that there is support for the concept, the transition, and not requiring it to go back to a full PUD. Because on the other side, until you get all that hammered out, doing engineering drawings and elevations and all that stuff gets very expensive, time consuming, whatever. But I think, so we would say that with the stipulation that there's an interest in moving this project forward and elicit the support of professionals, the neighborhood who has got professionals working with them, and our staff to bring it back to the committee in short order.
Well, you only have two choices. You can continue the application to another plan commission meeting if you want more information, or the recommended motion is for denial, and then the alternative motion is for approval. That's the only three things you got going here. We can't do that hybrid motion.
Okay. So, Mr. Rutledge, with that clarification, what is your thought?
I'll step down.
All right. So, okay. Again, we have to have a motion of some sort, or we're not going to get out of here.
Mr. Chair,
Mr.
I'd like to make a motion, based upon the staff report, evidence presented, comments made by the public hearing, finding the request to be inconsistent with Manatee County Comprehensive Plan and Manatee County Land Development Code as conditioned herein, I move to recommend denial of Manatee County zoning ordinance PDMU-18-11ZG and denial of the general development plan denying specific approval for a project 1 LDC section 900.5.C.4 criteria for administrative approval. Do I have to continue the whole thing?
Just say the three specific approvals, as in the recommended motion, as recommended by staff. 'Cause
Okay,
that's-
so I'll just finish it now. To review the compliance of the tree preservation requirements in the entranceway during the preliminary site plan review. Number 2, LDC section 403.8D8, use limitations and standards of coastal overlay districts, CHHA, CEA, and CPA, to allow a reduction to the open space requirements in coastal planning area. Number 3, LDC section 403.8F2, upland preservation and vegetation in the coastal overlay district, CHHA, CEA, and CPA, allow a reduction to the required 50% open space and natural vegetation of native uplands community as recommended by staff.
Okay, we have a motion. Before we take a second, Ms. Shank, if the applicant has a desire, do we need to take a second and then?
I don't know what he has to say.
Okay. Robert's Rule of Orders, does it require that we?
It's in discussion of the chair.
Okay, all right. Before we take a second, I would like to understand, it appears Mr. Vogler has something to offer.
I'm limited solely to the action that you're considering.
Yes, sir.
Our request would be that you not second that motion and not act on that motion, but rather move to continue this matter to a date uncertain that would allow us to meet with your staff and provide the supplemental information that they request. Okay, well.
Start all over. No, wait.
I think you heard.
Yes, sir.
Mostly.
I'll restate.
Yeah, all right. And so we came, we asked for parameters, we got parameters, and so we have a better feel for it, and I think a continuance would be better for us to stay in the process, if you don't mind, rather than just launching us toward the board.
Thank you. Ms. Shank, would it be appropriate if Mr. Heap withdrew his motion?
It's up to him.
I withdraw.
Okay, thank you. We have the motion withdrawn, and the chair would consider a motion to continue.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Mr. Ron?
I'd like to make a motion to continue this public hearing on, let me find it again, on PDMU 1811ZG till
date uncertain.
Till date uncertain.
Okay.
No date certain and re-advertise.
Okay.
You me change that, or you go?
Just have, and re-advertise at the
As
end.
it be advertised.
Very good. We have a motion. Is there a sec? Mr. On? Mr. Rutledge?
I would second it and like to make an addition.
Yeah, how about we second the motion and then we hear the comments after that?
Okay.
So, second the motion is that what you said?
Yes, sir, I'm seconding the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion. Mr. Rutledge?
I would like to add that in the continuance, that both parties, and ask staff and know that Mr. Vogel's members as well, would work to specifically address concerns raised as unclear or unsupported at this time, by way of example, including the road, river access, and I think the floodplain issues. I think those three and the like, but I think those three are very important to me, and I would like to add that as part of the request and the continuance.
Well, just my thought is respectfully that that's the whole process anyways, so I think it would be incumbent on the applicant to present that information, so I don't know
Well,
that.
but I would say this, having been on the other side, it's very important to know that you're not starting from scratch again, that you want to know that some of the stuff they present is very valuable, very well received, but there are some very specific things. That's up to you, but that would be my thought.
Okay. So, Mr. Ron, do you care to amend your motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll amend my motion to include what Mr. Rutledge is requesting.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rutledge, do you second that amended motion? Motion, not emotion. All right.
Although I don't always agree with that particular commissioner, I'm going to second it.
Very good. Very good, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Again, I'm going to call the roll, the vote by roll. So, Mr. DeLesline.
Aye.
Mr. Smock.
Aye.
Mr. Ron.
Aye.
Mr. Heap.
Aye.
Mr. Roth.
Aye.
Mr. Rutledge. Mr.
Aye.
Rutledge. Okay, thank you. All right, motion passes 7-0. The application is continued to a date uncertain as to be advertised. So, all right, I believe that concludes our, oh no, I'm sorry, we have one more matter of business. The minutes that were included in the agenda had the wrong date. The proper date of the minutes that we were to review and approve were on the 17th of November, 19th of November, 2020. So with that, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes on November 19th, 2020.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of November 19th, 2020 of the Planning Commission.
Very good. We have a motion and Mr. Ross second. Any discussion? All right. Chair's going to call the matter to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. And with that, we're gonna go ahead and close the public hearing. Thank you.